One, huh?
Time having arrived, I call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Councilor Farwell.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, and in response to some emails that have gone back and forth today, I just wanted to take a moment to ask for a moment of silence for the tragic loss of life in the city of Buffalo, New York. You know, that could happen anywhere. We're not immune from that. Unfortunately, it happens in this country far too often. I know some people have mentioned a vigil, and quite frankly, the vigil should be every day in our daily lives, where we try to treat people with courtesy and respect, and we pass laws that protect rights and don't take away rights from people. So to the people of Buffalo, especially to the families who lost loved ones, prayers and condolences, and I would just ask for a moment of silence. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Madam Clerk, item number 1.
Appointment of Robert Simpson of Brockton to the License Commission for a 3-year term ending May 2025. Invited Robert Simpson.
How are you? Good. You have anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
I've lived in Brockton most of my life, except for when I left to go to college, so I just thought this was a great chance to give back to the community that's given so much to me.
Absolutely. Councilors?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Appointment of Paul Beckner of Brockton as an alternate for the Council on Aging for a 3-year term ending May 2025. Invited Paul Beckner.
Good evening. You have anything you'd like to say?
Well, just like to say hello to everybody. It's been a while. It would be an honor and a privilege to help out at the Council on Aging in any fashion that I could, if I can lend something good to the seniors of our community. God knows they could use as much help as we could provide. Thanks.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Reappointment of Carlene, Derozier, Bazaar of Brockton to the Women's Commission for a 3-year term ending in May 2025. Invited Carlene, Derozier, Bazaar.
Is Ms. Derozier Bazaar here?
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that we hold that till the end of the meeting if there's no objection, and see if she arrives.
All right.
Second.
Councilors, all in favor of moving this to the end of the meeting? Motion passes.
Reappointment of Janice Johnson Plumer of Brockton to the Women's Commission for a 3-year term ending May 2025. Invited Janice Johnson Plumer.
Good evening. Have anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
Good evening. I'd just like to say thank you for an opportunity. I had served on the Women's Commission for the City of Brockton, I'd say a couple of years ago when it was up and going, and I enjoyed it. I feel like in the City of Brockton, many women and young girls, there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed, so it would be an honor to serve in this capacity. Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
All right, on the motion, real quick, I did receive an email from Councilor Nicastro. Councilor Nicastro is unable to attend tonight, but she did ask that her comment be read into the record. Quote, "I wholeheartedly support the reappointment of Ward 4 resident Ms. Plumer to the Women's Commission. I sit on committees with Ms. Plumer, and I find her to be a smart, no-nonsense person devoted to helping residents and making Brockton better." The motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Ordered that the city of Brockton will revoke the provisions of Chapter 44, subsection 53F and a half of the Massachusetts General Laws, ceasing the Renewable Energy Fund as an enterprise fund, effective fiscal year 2023. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Troy Clarkson, CFO.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. So, as I noted in my email to you over the weekend, the amount of money that has flowed through this enterprise fund over the last several years is minimal, and has actually required a small subsidy that you have voted during the budget process the last couple of years. So we work with our representatives from the Department of Revenue every year as they certify our annual figures. And one of the top, if not the top suggestion they had for us this year is that we eliminate this enterprise fund because of the minimal activity, of the subsidies that have been required. And really, it's an underperforming asset. The Department of Public Works and the Mayor's Office and I are working together with the Law Department to try to figure out some other long-term solution for this solar project, perhaps leasing it. But right now, it's not fulfilling the need for it to be segregated in an enterprise fund does not exist. And with us creating 2 new enterprise funds with your support, it makes sense to me to decommission this enterprise fund because we feel it's no longer necessary.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Mr. Clarkson. So say for fiscal year 2022, what level of subsidy has this solar field required?
I can get that exact figure for you, Councilor Thompson, but my recollection, it was about $14,000. It was minimal. It takes in about the same amount as it costs, but because it's in a state of disrepair, it hasn't taken in a lot of money. So the commissioner and I have worked together to look at options to invest city money in fixing it up. So solar, this was, those of you, most of you have been engaged in city affairs for some time. So you remember when this was originally constructed, it was celebrated as one of the first municipally owned bright fields in the Commonwealth and served its purpose. Solar technology, as it ages, its efficiency decreases. The ones that are constructed these days are more efficient and decrease less rapidly, but this has essentially lived out its useful life and either needs to be decommissioned or reconstituted, and that would require substantial investment.
Understood. And just for my own understanding, when was this solar field first put into operation?
I'm going to have to ballpark that for you, but it was quite some time ago. Councilor Rodriguez is saying 2007. Pat's saying 2007, 2004. So we'll get that exact date for you, but it has been certainly prior to my arrival.
All right, understood. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor D'Agostino.
Mr. Clarkson, thank you for being here tonight. Just wondering, what would the cost be? You said one option is obviously to fix it or upgrade it. Ballpark, any idea what that would cost to do?
So the last time we looked at that was during the time when Commissioner Rowley was still the commissioner, and at that time, the cost exceeded $100,000.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else, Councilor?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $78,000 from the assessor's office purchase of services, $78,000 to the assessor's office full-time salary, $78,000. Invited John O'Donnell, chairman, and Troy Clarkson, chief financial officer.
Counselor Azak.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion, take 6, 8, and 15 collectively, as they're related to the same matter.
Counselor, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been properly seconded. All in favor of taking items 6, 18, and 15 collectively? All opposed?
6, 8, and 15.
Sorry, 6, 8, and 15 collectively. All opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, last December, the council,
Mr. Clarkson, do you mind if we just read
Oh,
numbers
geez.
8 and 15?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
about
Of
that.
course.
Yeah.
Ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $61,128 from law department purchase of services, $20,000. Human resources full-time salaries, $41,128. To the law department full-time salaries, $61,128. Invited Megan Bridges, city solicitor, and Troy Clarkson, chief financial officer. Ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $19,079 from the treasurer collector purchase of services, $4,000. Human resources full-time salaries, $15,079. To the treasurer collector full-time salaries, $19,079. Invited Martin Brophy, treasurer, and Troy Clarkson, chief financial officer.
Counselor Solicitor Bridges did contact me prior to the start of the meeting. She says that she is unable to come in and sends her regrets. Mr. Clarkson.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So back in December, as you recall, this council approved changes to the pay ordinance, which increased the pay for most of the ordinance employees here in the city. At the time, I noted to you that we would be able to fund most of those changes from within the existing salaried budgets, as there were sufficient funds there. These three transfers that are before you tonight are in departments that did not have sufficient funds in their salary line, requiring transfers from elsewhere. I should note that when we were able to, we funded those transfers from within that departmental budget, but in some cases, additional funds were required. Those funds, because of some vacancies in the Human Resource Department, you'll see that some of those transfers are requested from that department. So there's no overall increase in the operating budget for the city. We're funding these changes to the pay ordinance through existing funds, but in some cases, as I mentioned, we had to use funds from other budgets, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilors? If there are no questions, is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, on these collectively now, correct? Did we pass that?
We did already take them collectively.
All right, thank you.
So this is on passage or recommending favorably to the full council, items 6, 8, and 15.
Thank you.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes.
Ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $22,880.05 from the Emergency Management Agency, purchase of services, $2,048. Human Resources full-time salaries, $22,832.05. To Emergency Management Agency, full-time salaries, $22,880.05. Invited Stephen Hook, Director, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
So actually, Mr. Chairman, this one is related to the three that you just passed, so increases were made to the salaries in emergency management as part of that ordinance change, and so this is a request similar to those that you just passed.
Thank you, Mr. Clarkson.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Councilor Texera, I believe, his hand up.
Mr. Chairman,
You had your hand up. Okay.
the ad doesn't add up, so I will make a recommendation to do that because 22 $880.05 plus 2248 does not add up to $22,832.05. So I will make the amendment to change that.
Make the amendment to change the math.
Yes.
Counselor, is there a second to fix the math
Second.
on item number 7?
Can we clarify what is the math?
The two items,
22,880 plus the 2,048, correct?
yeah, the total comes out to 22,000 right now. It should be 24.
Yes, makes sense.
I think that was just
Scribner's
must have been
errors.
a typo in the agenda, you're correct.
But it does have to be amended.
Oh,
It can't
absolutely,
just be
yeah,
Scribner.
sorry about that.
Yep. Counselors, all in favor of the amendment? All opposed? The amendment passes. Counselor Farrell, you had a motion?
A motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you for the catch, Counselor.
Ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $50,000 from the Department of Public Works Highway Personal Services other than overtime to the Department of Public Works Highway Personal Services overtime. This transfer is necessary in order to cover projected overtime expenses and emergencies for the remainder of the fiscal year. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Hill?
Council President, councilors. So this transfer will be to continue the level of service that we've been providing with the highway department. I'm sure you all remember, the overtime budget took a substantial hit in the month of November when we had a nor'easter. We had 5 or 6 straight days of overtime, cutting trees and limbs. That combined with the amount of COVID that went through my department and the pay raises from the most recent collective bargaining agreements is why I'm here, so.
Motion to recommend
Thank you,
favorably?
Counselor.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Ordered that the city of Brockton appropriates the amount of $16 million to pay costs of designing, reconstructing, and rehabilitating the city's sewer system, including but not limited to cleaning, inspecting, and relining sewer lines in mains, manhole rehabilitation, bypass pumping, and all other costs incidental and related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under the General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 8, for or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city. Therefore, further ordered that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under the General Law, Chapter 44A, any and all bonds or notes of the city authorized by this vote, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Martin Brophy, Treasurer, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clarkson?
Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'd like to make some general comments that apply to numbers 10, 11, and 12 to provide an introduction and some insight into some information that I sent you over the weekend. And then, of course, Marty Brophy and/or Pat Hill will be happy to answer any questions you have. So these 3 items are requesting a significant amount of borrowing, more than $50 million. But what I believe we have demonstrated to you is the opportunity for these borrowings to fit within our current debt schedule in the water and sewer enterprise funds, not creating any further pressure on the ratepayers here in the city, and not requiring any additional appropriation to support this debt. So over the weekend, I sent you, I know it was a lot of information, but I hope that it was helpful in providing perspective on these 3 borrowings. So what we provided was a series of payback schedules. All 3 projects qualify and have been approved by the Commonwealth under what's called the State Revolving Fund. And that's a program through the Commonwealth, through the Department of Environmental Protection, that is specifically geared toward water and sewer projects. Generally, sewer projects, this first one, not only get a preferred interest rate, and right now that's 1.5%, but also get a certain percentage of principal forgiveness. So the standard is and has been 9.9%. But the way much of the bipartisan infrastructure, I'll call that the BIL law that was passed by Congress and signed by the president, much of that is coming to the Commonwealth for water and sewer projects through the state revolving fund. And so we were notified by them last week that we expect that principal forgiveness to not be 9.9%, but to be at least 17.4%. So that takes that $16 million project and reduces it down to $13,216. Now, Pat can speak to you about the specifics of the sewer system rehab, but what I've tried to do is demonstrate to you what the principal and interest would be. And then later in that same presentation, and Evan, could you just call up the slide? It is in your packets anyway. There's the one, page 19, Evan, the sewer total debt, because I think that's instructive, particularly for this first slide. Much like we've talked about in the general fund that enabled us to fund the public safety complex within the levy limit without raising taxes, the sewer enterprise fund has significantly reduced debt a few years from now. So on this slide, that I hope is up on your screens as well, I draw your attention to that graph furthest to the right. And what we've done is overlay the reducing debt in the sewer enterprise with the costs of this 16 million reduced to 13 million by the state revolving fund. One of the tools that we can use, and again, Marty can speak to this as well, is we have the ability to temporarily borrow and pay interest only for a few years. So our plan is to slide this $16 million in debt, and those are improvements to the sewer system, to temporarily borrow for a few years to take advantage of that precipitous drop-off that you see in the debt, so that we can bring on $16 million in new debt without increasing the budgeted amount that we spend, and right now that's about $6.5 million on debt out of the enterprise every year. So think of it this way. If you had a mortgage on your home and you were ready to pay off your mortgage, and let's say you were paying $2,000 a month for your mortgage. When your mortgage was paid off, you could remortgage the house or take on new debt and not increase the amount you're spending every month on your household expenses, but have additional cash on hand to make investments in your home. The concept is the same here. So in the sewer enterprise, we can do significantly more work in addition to this 16 million over the next few years and keep it within our current debt profile. That's very important. So I'll let Pat speak to the specifics about what this program would do and why this is necessary, but 2 points I would like to impress upon you, both of which I've already mentioned. One, this is approved by the Commonwealth State Revolving Fund, making it eligible for significant principal forgiveness. And two, it fits well within our current debt profile, so it's affordable and will not create any rate pressure on the citizens of Brockton. Pat, you want to just describe the program briefly?
I think it'd probably be easier if I went through these one by one. The agenda I have isn't labeled in the same number, so I guess we can start with the initial one that Troy was speaking about here.
Yeah, that's the one we're on right now.
Okay, so the SRF program right now, I think Troy described it pretty well. This initial phase of work, which we got approved for, was $2.2 million. It's going to be a future lining project. We've already started the planning for that project. We have our CCTV truck out in the field, identifying areas that were identified through an SSCS program, through flow metering. So this first piece will begin sometime before June of next year. The construction or the lining project will start sometime before June of next year.
Councilors? Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Commissioner Hill. Mr. Clarkson, that's 17.4% principal forgiveness. That's locked in? So that's exactly what it's going to be?
Yes, locked in that it is the minimum. We believe it could be as high as 49% with bipartisan infrastructure law money, but we're not certain of that. They have committed in writing that it'll be at least that 17.4.
Okay, so at least 17.4 with a potential of 49%. When do we find out whether it's, what the exact number will be?
I don't know that the Commonwealth is committed to that.
Yeah, they haven't given us any guidance about how they're going to apply the BIL money. The difference, the 9 to the 17, that was done with state ARPA money.
Okay.
So there's a lot of what-ifs in the paperwork that they've sent out to us. We've been or attended several different sessions with the DEP. We hope to find out by the end of the year or by the end of the fiscal year, by July, but there hasn't been any sure guidance yet, so.
Okay, understood. When it comes to the debt, you said that what our plan is for the first few years, pay interest only, and kind of push that down to when the precipitous drop happens and then start paying principal and interest at that time?
That's correct.
Okay. And from looking at the chart, the precipitous drop happens in 2028. We're going to float this until then?
Yes, and as Pat mentioned, this initial phase is only a couple of $1 million, so this, sort of like the public safety building, authorizes a maximum of $16 million. We won't spend that all at once.
Okay.
So we'll only incur interest costs on the money that we borrow.
Okay, understood. That makes a little more sense. So you said the first tranche is 2.2 million to get, and what does that get us? What's that phase?
That $2.2 million will be used for lining. You know, we go out and line a substantial portion of the collection system every year. It prevents a lot of I&I inflow and infiltration down to the sewer plant, so less water to treat, I guess, or less sewage to treat. So the projects pay for themselves. We also line manholes and do survey work for future projects.
And so will that line, I'm assuming you already have some sewers lined from previous work. This is going to finish off the city, or?
No, this will finish off a portion of the city. Most of these areas were identified through a flow metering program that we had done a couple years ago. So we know where the heavy inflow and infiltration is. We concentrate on those areas. And it all depends on the cost, what the costs come in for the lining work. So we squeeze as much as we can out of the lining work. So we prepare for almost double the project when we set it up, but it's all dictated by cost, so.
This lining work, is this done by DPW, or we hire a contractor?
We have a contractor that comes in and does it.
Our sewers, that's PVC, right? Or what is
Most
our
of the
sewer?
old sewers are clay.
Clay.
Yeah.
And what do we line it with?
They're lined with PVC.
Okay. All right. And then, so what's 2.2, when would we expect to move on to these additional phases?
So every year we apply for this relining project. We have a couple of other projects that are in the queue right now that will be applying to the IUP list in August for the SRF program. So the projects that we hope to make the list, some of them are construction projects as well as lining projects. So this borrowing will be used for that too.
Right, but we're authorizing up to $16 million of borrowing. So those other projects you said would potentially be other borrowings, or within the 16 million?
It will be within the 60 million.
But they still got to qualify for SRF to
Correct.
get into this?
Yes.
Authorization.
Well, I don't know that they necessarily have to be SRF to get within this authorization, but that's the goal.
I think that's an accurate answer, Counselor. So your authorization authorizes borrowing up to $16 million. It's our preference that we get projects qualified for the SRF because of the preferred interest rate and the principal forgiveness. But let's just say the Commonwealth did away with that program, the continued lining is still important, so we would continue with the program up until the 16 million. That's highly unlikely. It's a wildly successful program, the SRF program, that's been around for a very long time.
Right, so it's not the issue of SRF going away. I don't think it's going away. But as of right now, the only monies that will be eligible for principal forgiveness is the 2.2 that
Correct.
they're moving ahead on right now. So in the future, if through that $16 million borrowing, if what project we're designating with that money is not SRF or doesn't, I mean, they could say, no, we're not accepting that into the program, then we're not going to get principal forgiveness or a 1.5% interest rate.
Correct.
Okay? So that we'd come back with new numbers representing, would you still move forward with the borrowing, even if it's not SRF qualified, or say we have a need that is expected to be authorized or used with this authorization, but it doesn't qualify for SRF. Will the 16 million still be applied to that, or are we only looking for SRF programs with this money?
No, I mean, the work is important, and the $16 million figure was developed between the Department of Public Works and their consultant identifying priority projects for this work. So the work is important, as Pat said, and I'm stepping aside a little bit out of my primary expertise, but having overseen these issues before, the infiltration I&I issue that he spoke of increased costs to operate the plant, and it requires us, when there's infiltration, to treat more wastewater. So these projects are important whether or not they qualify for SRF, because they're important improvements to the system that increase the efficiency to the plant and reduce the need to treat water that does not need to be treated.
Right.
How was that? Perfect.
No, I understand the importance of the projects, but our projected forecasts are assuming that the whole 16 million will have a 17.4% principal forgiveness and a 1.5%
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Principal balance. And potentially, that's not decided today.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Farwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I appreciated the opportunity to talk with you last week about this, and let me say, clearly there is a need for the work to be done. There are a couple of things that I do want to say to my fellow councilors, and combining this particular item with the other one, you know, we're throwing around some pretty significant figures here. $50 million. I never thought I'd live to see the city council rationally discussing borrowing $50 million for something, because we've had some financial concerns in the past. So let's remember that we are already borrowing $98 million for the public safety facility. I know this is going to be paid out of the sewer enterprise account. However, we will be binding future mayors and city councils to make sure that the revenue flow into that sewer enterprise fund is sufficient to pay the debt service. We don't know if there might be some EPA changes, some regulations that require additional borrowing. I know we had to do that for water. So while this work has to be done, I'm going to treat it pretty seriously. And one of the things that bothers me is that the need for this has been known since last March. The letter from bond counsel was dated March 17th, and you and I have kind of had an offline conversation, Mr. Clarkson, before. I don't understand why, as a city council, we don't get an accompanying list of here's what's going to be done, here's where it's going to be done, here are the approximate timelines to begin the work, and here are the approximate completion dates. I doubt that Councilor Tavares has any idea what will go on in her ward if this 16 million is borrowed. I doubt that Councilor D'Agostino does. I doubt that Councilor Minicello has any idea what's going to be done if we borrow this 16 million. And it just seems to me, we as councilors ought to be able to rationally explain to residents, either individually or in a meeting, this is what we're going to do with that borrowing. So I have to tell you, I'm disappointed that if you did all of that work, all of that preliminary work, sending it into the state revolving fund and going to bond council, why not put some paperwork out in advance so that we don't get this in the month of May, when we go into budget hearings in June, and then we go on summer schedule with only one official meeting in June. And I'm going to echo the same thing for the 50 million. I just think we don't do enough information sharing. You know what's going on, but ultimately we have to decide whether this is the prudent thing to do and politically defend it. And I would hope that this might be an opportunity, councilors, to improve the process, that if we're going to do major projects like this and approve it, let's get information out in advance. Let's know what we're doing. Let's be able to understand the implications for our residents. Will streets be disturbed while we replace sewer mains? Will that affect neighborhoods? Will it affect schools and when they open in September? I have no idea, but I find that disappointing. But let me ask a technical question. If you only need 13 million, if you know for sure now that you're down to $13,216,000, you wouldn't borrow a couple of $1 million extra in your own personal life if you didn't need it. Should that order be amended down? Would that be the prudent thing to do in your judgment?
No, and here's why. That's sort of a quirk of the way that the state revolving fund works. You have to have authorization for the full amount, and then you get the principal forgiveness, so we wouldn't anticipate borrowing up to that full amount, but we are required to have an authorization for that amount. And to address the other point that you made, Councilor Farwell, that is a point that's very well taken. You know my approach, and I'm a proponent of sharing as much information as necessary, and I just asked Pat, and we're more than happy to share with you, and should have shared with you, the specific list of areas and streets that are going to see this work. You know that I will suggest, based on a conversation that Councilor Farwell and Councilor Nicastro and Pat and I had last week, that you postponed the next discussion on the sludge dryer to allow for a more robust public discussion at Councilor Nicastro's ward meeting. And certainly if the council wanted to take time to review the information from the commissioner on the specific projects related to this sewer system improvement program, we do anticipate postponing the next item anyway. So I'm certainly happy to work with Pat to get you additional information so that you have the opportunity to properly consider the item.
Well, and let me conclude by saying, I don't think you did anything wrong. I'm looking to improve the process, the flow of information. And it's not because any of us are super important. We're residents, we temporarily serve in these positions. But I'm a resident, so I kind of have a vested interest when we start throwing around $50 million and, you know, sewer bills come in, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could put together a summary on a ward-by-ward basis as to what you anticipate will be done, when it will be done, when you think the work will be commencing, when you reasonably project it might be concluded, and then footnote anything that you might think that it would disrupt, like if you're going to do something on East Ashland Street, that's a major street. Certainly Councilor Thompson might want to know that. If you were going to do something on Pearl Street, Councilor Minicello would want to know that, and the at-large councilors like to keep a pulse on what's going on citywide. So clearly the work has to be done, and if you could get that additional information out, and then in the future we'll work with you to not have it come in at the last moment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. I have a quick question for you, because we have been hearing lately that interest rates are going up everywhere. I mean, I know the Feds just, increased the landing rates. What guarantee do you actually have that this 1.5% is going to be 1.5% by the time we actually okay the borrowing?
We believe that the state revolving fund has generally been recession-proof and that those rates stay consistent. So I have no guarantee, Counselor, but have reasonable assurance based on what's happened in the past that those rates from the SRF will remain stable. We are watching, Marty and I speak daily, certainly several times a week, about interest rates because, for instance, we have a $98 million authorization out there. We've incurred about $12 million in costs. So we're speaking and trying to strategize on whether or not we should just borrow the entirety of it and have the cash on hand to gauge against those interest rate increases. If you remember, when we first talked about the $98 million, we looked at the city's declining debt in 2028 and thought maybe we should temporarily borrow and take advantage of that debt decline. We could not have anticipated when we had that discussion over a year ago for general obligation debt. That's why the state revolving fund is so important, because it's not general obligation debt, and it's treated differently because the money comes from the Commonwealth, so they offer that preferred interest rates as an incentive to get cities and towns to improve their public utilities.
But that 1.5 is the lowest it's been in years. It wasn't always 1.5.
The SRF has consistently been at 1.5 for a while. Marty?
No, I'm saying, no, for a while, yes, but I'm talking about in years past, when interest rates were a lot higher in the country itself, that was not at 1.5%.
The treasurer collector informs me that the state revolving fund has been steady at that low interest rate for about 15 years. So as I said, it's generally been recession-proof.
So basically, there's no fear of us in terms of what Council Farwell was saying, in terms of us rushing this, or if we delay it for a couple weeks or so, until we get the proper information that we need, that we're not going to harm the borrowing power, basically.
Yes, I try generally to operate with faith, not fear. So I can't guarantee you that the rates won't go up, but we have.
Well, if it hasn't gone in 30 years or whatever you're saying.
The key for the SRF is, and we're here before you at this point, because the Commonwealth does require that we agree to these projects prior to June 30th. So we're up against that date, but certainly not any pressure with interest rates.
What about, I mean, you brought that up, I wasn't going to bring it up, but the borrowing for the public safety building. You said that basically we need to borrow 98, but we haven't really done that, and that fluctuates basically based on interest rates. So why are we not taking advantage of that opportunity so that we can save the taxpayers? Because I know that anybody can see that the rates are going to go up within the next couple of years. Probably doubling from where it is right now. Why are we not taking advantage of that and move forward and borrow the funds that we need to borrow and get them at least on the city side of things so that we don't cost the residents a few millions of dollars in interest?
We are. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, Marty and I are working on that actively. Spent an hour with our debt advisor last week on the phone, just to give you an example. If interest rates are rising at perhaps an alarming rate. So last week we sat with our debt advisors and we had them calculate the difference of borrowing that $98 million at 4% versus 5%. Now, a year ago, those numbers were preposterous, right? 10 years ago, those numbers were commonplace. The difference to the city over the payback of the loan, 4% versus 5%, if we borrow at 4%, we save $31 million. So we are, I can guarantee you, actively pursuing that, and it's very likely that right after July 1st, we will seek to borrow the entirety of that $98 million for that very purpose, to save in those interest costs. The reason why we wait till July 1st is because if we borrow it before July 1st, then the first payment becomes due next year. If we wait until just after July 1st, but before the Fed meets again to raise interest rates, which is our plan, we would most likely get still a very competitive interest rate that will lock us in and save tens of millions of dollars over the life of the loan.
You made an impression, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's.
Todd agrees with me.
I think it's the $34 million that you said it's going to end up costing us by the time we're done with this thing. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah. I don't know, the weather's cooled down. If it were still as hot as it were earlier, that might have been a signal that there was a lot of hot air, but
Oh, stop that.
we'll give all ourselves the pass. Counselor Azak.
My questions were answered, thank you.
Excellent. Counselor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just wondering, well, first of all, I obviously, like some of my colleagues, have concerns about the amount of our indebtedness. We're talking about $98 million, $50 million here, and lest we forget, at some point, the MSBA is going to approve Brockton High School for renovation, and I can't see that being under $100 million. Not that I'm at all qualified to be, deciding how much that will be, but it just seems, I don't think we get out from under that under $100 million. So right there, in just those couple of items, there's $250 million that the Brockton taxpayers are going to have to pay. So I guess, and you can respond to that part of my comment if you'd like, but I am a little concerned, with some of the numbers and borrowing. And it's all stuff that, again, it's all stuff that needs to be done. There's no question there. But one of the real question I wanted to ask, and I wasn't on the council at the time that these things were done, so maybe I just don't have the full details, but if I were sitting at home watching this meeting, I would be thinking, wait a minute, didn't they just do an increase in the water rates, $15 user fee quarterly, I think it's quarterly, and then the $6, the new fee that went on for sewer management of $6, I think that's a month. No, it's quarterly, I'm sorry. So the rates are going up, the fees are going on. Weren't those to pay for these types of projects?
So I'll answer the second question first, Counselor. The answer is yes, and that's exactly why I'm able to show you that graph, that we're able to do work like a $16 million sewer system improvement, a $35 million sludge dryer, and as I said at the beginning, I can say with assurance that borrowing this money will not cause additional pressure on the rates. Because I said at the time when the council increased the rates that it was a specific purpose of raising those rates was to create sufficient revenue within the enterprises that we could fund capital projects. So it's as a result of the work that, and it was courageous, the work that the council did to raise those rates enables us to do projects like this without further raising rates. To answer your first question, you're right, it's a lot of debt. And for decades, the city was forced to defer maintenance because it could not afford to invest in the necessary infrastructure. But when I asked that this council borrow that $98 million, I believe we sufficiently demonstrated that we could pay for that within the levy limit, which means without a debt exclusion, without costing the taxpayers additional funds. And I'm still comfortable that we're able to do that. So we borrowed a lot of money to build a public safety complex. I can tell you, in most municipalities, there would be a debt exclusion on the ballot to raise taxes by an amount sufficient to pay that debt. But the mayor was intent on not costing the taxpayers additional funds to build this, and we have stayed true to that and will stay true to that. We will have, within the next couple of years, what will likely be, your figure is accurate, an additional $100 million in debt. I can't stand here and guarantee you that that additional debt we will be able to fund without a debt exclusion, but I think as we get closer to that, that's an honest discussion that we need to have.
All right, so, and I just want to make sure I'm clear. So those fees and rate increases basically are going to fund the payments on this debt. Is that am I understanding that right?
There's not a direct line, but the simple answer is yes. We are generating more revenue, which allows us
can
to do things
that
like
service.
this, yes.
Okay.
And also to pay cash, because we're generating retained earnings, so other capital improvements, the purchase of equipment, things like that, we'll be able to use that money on hand and not incur interest costs.
Okay. And I apologize if this question is I'm going to say a rookie question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You always hear about in the federal government talking about a debt ceiling, and obviously there's limits on the borrowing that they can do. Do we have as a city, like a limit to how much we can borrow? Do you know what that number is off the top of your head? Okay.
Yes. The general rule of thumb in Massachusetts for municipalities is that we spend no more than 10% of our operating budget on principal and interest. The budget that was filed with the city clerk today, off the top of my head, the principal and interest debt figure is somewhere around $16 million out of a general fund budget that's almost $470 million. So we are well below that threshold. One of the reasons why we were able to get such a competitive interest rate on the pension obligation debt that you recently approved was because our debt profile is so low. So we spend very little of our overall budget on debt service.
Okay. All right. So 10% of the budget is the max allowed by state law, and you're saying that we're only at?
Not by law, but so the general rule of thumb for good, solid practice.
Okay.
So it's not a law, but Moody's and S&P, when they rate us, if we had debt that exceeded that 10%, it would count against us and it would impact our bond rating.
Okay. All right. And at this point, our debt service is 16, was that, did I understand that
That's
right?
off the top of my head, but
Roughly.
Roughly 16 million out of roughly a $470 million general fund budget, 468, I think the number was.
Right. Okay.
So we're well in, so 10%, I can do that math in my head, right? That would be about $47 million,
Right.
and we're well below that.
So, and again, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but I'm just thinking, now you mentioned, for example, a project like the high school, putting us in a position where we'd need a debt exclusion to fund that. Is that would put us over? I'm trying to figure out what that 10% is, the total, the amount we owe, or just the amount we owe in payments on the debt, right?
So that represents the annual principal and interest payments.
Right.
And in the back of your budget book, when you get it,
Yeah.
it actually lists every debt issue that we have and what the payments are. So that backs up the actual request in Marty's budget for the principal and interest. So with that budget book we created, you can see exactly how that number is built. So I would say my reason for initiating a discussion on a debt exclusion is not so much because that additional debt would put us over the top in terms of that 10%, because it wouldn't.
Right.
But it would cost $5 to $7 million a year in principal and interest payments. And if we don't have a debt exclusion, then that $5 to $7 million needs to come from somewhere in the operating budget.
Right.
Now, maybe we can create in the next few years $5 million in additional tax revenue, and that's possible with some of the development that's going on here, particularly some of the larger sites. But absent that, I think we just need to have a serious discussion over the next year or so about that priority project. You know, I was hopeful when we first talked about it that we could fit that within that window of opportunity when the debt retires in 2028, and that is still possible. But as we look to incurring additional debt, I think it's responsible to have a discussion about how we're going to pay for that in the long term.
100%, absolutely. All right, in advance, so that we can tell people, great, yeah, we want to renovate the high school, and yes, our part is $100 million, or, you know, whatever it is, and here's how we plan to pay for it.
Right.
You know, because you know, again, we all say the same thing when we're seeing what they do at the federal level. Okay, how do you pay, how you plan on paying for that? They don't usually answer that, but we should. So, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Counselor. Counselor, is there anyone else, or would anyone like to make a motion?
Were we postponing this, or wasn't there a discussion to do that, or there's no need for that?
Counselor Farwell?
Well, Mr. Chairman, through you to Councilor Thompson, I think we should, along with the companion 34 million, put this over to the next FinCom. And Mr. Chairman, if I could just offer one comment, we have to take care of the schools. I mean, we absolutely have to do that. So, so if your motion is to postpone to the next FinCom, I would second it.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Azak?
I don't believe we can, I think it has to go back to city council and get referred back. I don't think, we can't refer from committee to committee unless you're postponing, right?
Well, that's what it was.
Oh, you're just
It's
postponing it?
Postponing.
Okay, sorry, you said referring, so
I'm sorry.
okay.
Okay. So I make a motion to postpone this matter to the next Finance Committee meeting.
And I'll second that.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. The next Finance Committee meeting is June 20th. All in favor of postponing?
What did you say, June 20th?
June 20th.
Budget.
Oh, didn't we have to
Between
get this done
budgets and
before the
special meetings, June 20th.
city council's after that, though, right?
Mr. Clarkson, the deadline on this is July 1st.
Yeah, I assume that if you have a FinCom on June 20th, you'll have a final
FinCom would be June 20th.
full council meeting before the
Full
30th.
council would be June 27th.
Right. Okay.
So this is still
tight, but we can do it.
doable that way.
Oh, God, no.
Including appeal?
If we moved reconsideration.
Okay.
Councilors, there is a motion on the floor. All in favor of postponing this? to
On the
finance-
motion, I'd like to ask our
Counselor Azak.
CFO and our commissioner, does that work for, is that cutting it too close? I mean, we don't want to
So we're
risk.
just working through here, and Marty reminds me that because it's a debt issue, it requires 3 readings, but that may be, is that waivable or no? Okay.
Councilors, we could possibly send this back to council favorably, unfavorably, and postpone it from council to council. We can still give it a month worth of extra consideration, if that is amenable to the members.
Well, we can get it to the second reading at the end of this month.
Yes.
And then,
Postpone it and have the third reading in June.
right, third reading, yeah.
So
We're moving it along.
All right, I'll withdraw my motion.
I'll
and-
make a
And I'll make a motion to recommend favorably to the full city council.
Second.
The motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson.
Ordered that this,
Councilor Tavares.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, actually, Mr. Carlene is here right now. We'd like to discuss it, if you want to proceed with that right now.
So you're moving to take item number 3 from the end of the meeting to now? Is
yes.
there a second?
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded to take item number 3, the reappointment of Mr. Derozier Bazaar, right now. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Good evening.
reappointment of Carlene Derozier Bazaar of Brockton to the Women's Commission for a 3-year term ending May 2025. Invited Carlene Derozier Bazaar.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the councilors? All right. Is there anything you'd like to say to the councilors?
I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much for reappointing me. I'm looking forward to work with the women in the city of Brockton.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion
you.
to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordered that the city of Brockton appropriates the amount of $600,000 to pay costs of conducting a lead service line inventory and creating a detailed electronic database and map of the city's water service lines, including payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore. Further ordered that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under General Law, Chapter 44A, in any and all bonds or notes of the city authorized by this vote. and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require, provided Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Martin Brophy, Treasurer, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clarkson, Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this amount is obviously much, much smaller, and because of that, fits again within the debt profile in the Water Enterprise Fund. The specifics of the program Pat can discuss with you. This is a requirement of the DEP to do this important work. So I think, unlike the previous one and the next one, that is some $35 million, we feel confident that this is appropriate and affordable now, but did provide you a debt schedule in the packet that we provided to you.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, why is it that if we have some money already in that budget that we actually have been saving from these funds all along since the implementation of the fees, why do we need to borrow $600,000 when we could just take that money, do what we need to do, and then borrow whatever other monies we need to borrow, but to separate that so that it's not, I mean, we've got a bunch of borrowing going on here, and I think what Councilor from Ward 3 was saying is before you know it, we're a borrowing city all over the place instead of just kind of utilizing the funds that we have to do the work that needs to be done. Why do we need to borrow $600,000?
That, Councilor, is an excellent question, one which Pat and I discussed and debated very recently. In fact, this project specifically is ARPA eligible, so I said, why not just spend $600,000 in ARPA cash to complete this project? And the reason is because by going through the SRF, you get the principal forgiveness. So we conducted an exercise, right? And if you're getting, and with this, Pat just said to me, the water reimbursements are a little different than the sewer, but it's 19.8%, correct?
Yep.
Let's round it up to 20, just to make the math easy. $300,000, 20%, that's a $60,000 savings in principal forgiveness. So it makes sense.
But we're borrowing $600,000 to pay in 20 years. Why not just basically utilize the fund? I understand the $30,000 that you're saying, but when it's all said and done, in the other payments on the other side, you're still paying money onto the interest of the $600,000 that you're borrowing. So it's like, you know, to either take it from your left hand or from your right hand. So you're still kind of taking it away one way or the other. But why not just utilize the funds that you have and then see what happens as we go down the line?
It's a
Because
very
you're going to get it on the forefront, but at the same time, on the long run, you're still going to pay it. Because you're borrowing, you're paying on the interest of the monies that we're borrowing. So when you borrow $600,000, when it's all said and done, I'm sure your payment's going to be more than $30,000.
Than 60,000. If you look just at the 1.5%, over the 20 years, the payback is 94, but that's on borrowing the full $600,000. So when you factor in, we believe, when you factor in the principal forgiveness, it's close, but it makes sense, and the principal forgiveness is only eligible if you borrow the money. We specifically asked the DEP that because I said, why not spend ARPA cash? And we could do that, but the DEP would not provide us with that principal forgiveness.
I don't know. $90,000 down the road and $30,000 up front to me all sounds basically not a great deal of savings. So I still think that we should just utilize whatever funds we have and move forward with this thing instead of borrowing it. Go ahead, Pat. You wanted to say something.
I just want to be clear, it's $120,000 principal forgiveness, so it's 20%.
I said 60,
Okay.
it's 10%.
Yeah.
Because the original was 9.9. He's right.
Well, that makes a little bit of a difference.
And we anticipate especially with the water, especially with this program, the EPA is really looking to get rid of all the lead service lines across the country because of situation that happened in Flint, Michigan, which I'm sure everybody's aware of. So we anticipate that this project will be funded at 49%, That's what we're being told. So now you're talking about a $300,000 principal forgiveness. We haven't gotten the guidance on that yet, but that's the way everything's pointing right now, so.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then I don't have a problem with that, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor D'Agostino, followed by Counselor Thompson.
Following along the same lines as Councilor Rodriguez, I'm wondering, how long does it typically take to get the principal forgiveness to happen? And I don't know the mechanics of how that works, but from when you borrow it to when we no longer owe that 120K or whatever it ultimately ends up being, how long of a time frame is that usually?
Fund is renewed, and catch me if you disagree, Pat, but the fund, the SRF, is renewed every year, so each project is completed on an annual basis.
Okay, so we're looking at about a year before that would be forgiven?
I believe, and I could be wrong, that might be a better question for Marty, but I believe the way it works, Counselor, is when the project is complete and the loan is closed out, the principal forgiveness comes up front, and then you only pay the 1.5% based on the total project value after the forgiveness.
Okay. And I was just curious too, and if we're getting 120 forgiven, 120 plus, that's substantial, but just out of curiosity, so let's say they forgive it, and maybe I'm asking this not knowing how this works, but that leaves us with at least, what, 480 in remaining debt. Do we have to make that in payments, or could we pay that off? No.
No, what you do is authorize the treasurer and the mayor to borrow the money.
Mm-hmm.
You're not required, nor do we go out and borrow the entire amount. We always only borrow the amount that we need. So you'll see from
Okay.
time to time that we'll come before you and actually rescind borrowing authorizations when they're no longer necessary.
Okay.
So we're not obligated. The conversation we were having about the 98 million a few minutes ago was because we know we're going to spend all of that 98 million on that project.
Right.
But on the 16 million, if we only spend 15 on the sewer lining, then we'll only borrow 15 million. And you'll have $1 million in authorization to borrow, but we won't necessarily borrow that money. So that's the way it works. When we have an authorization, we don't just go out and borrow all the money. Marty and I speak frequently on that and only go to market with the money that we need.
Okay, so as you're going, okay.
So rather than pay as you go, you borrow as you go.
Right, okay. All right, I understand, and thank you for the clarification about how that works. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we talk about the project itself? You mentioned Flint, Michigan. So from my understanding, this money is to hunt for lead piping in our system.
That's correct. So we don't necessarily, what they identify as lead service lines are, it would be a service line from the water main into the property that's entirely lead. I've worked for the city for 26 years. 20 years of that was on the water department. I've never seen one. But the goal of the project is to look through, we have like 26,000 locations. To look through those locations, identify what services potentially could have lead service lines, get those put into a GIS map, and then we have to select a percentage of services that are unknown as the EPA looks at them. So maybe we don't have 100% accurate location that identifies exactly what the line is made of. And then we have to do a certain percentage of the system that we can identify in a project. So this will set up that project to get that map together, fulfill our initial obligation with the lead service line, because we're obligated to be lead service free by 2025.
Okay, so, through our system right now, any service, what did you call them, a service?
Service line?
A service line.
Yeah.
Any service line that was installed, say, after 1975 is going to be clear?
Correct.
Okay, so then we may have some understandings of those that are lead that were installed before that, and then there's some stuff we have no clue. We got to go dig in and go look.
Yeah, it all depends on the record keeping. like I said, I worked for the department for a considerable amount of time. Not everybody kept accurate records. There are, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of 26,000 locations of individual locations that sit within the water department. We have to individually go through each and every one of those.
So
to
go through
identify-
cards to see if there's
The
any.
location cards, yes.
The location cards, and then for those that don't have location cards or we're just not sure, we gotta actually go dig in and go find out whether there's lead there or not.
Yeah, we have to take pictures, we have to file reports, all the reports have to go to the EPA, so.
And then this will, eventually, once we have it all GIS, then we know where, all these locations are. This will then, set us up for further funding to change out those service lines that lead are found in.
That's correct. And it's important to note, too, that the SRF program looks at this as the #1 priority for the next 5 years. So any project that revolves around lead service lines will automatically scores in the top tier, so.
And so how long do you believe it'll take for us to make that search and identify our lead service lines in Brockton?
I mean, I would expect where this is a planning project that by June of next year, we'll have identified everything that we need to, have submitted the paperwork and begun to put a project together.
And then that project, how long do you estimate how long a project would be to replace all our lead service lines?
It'll all depend on the size of the project, so.
Yeah.
A couple years, I would think.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors, is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion's passed.
Ordered that the city of Brockton appropriates the amount of $34,800,000 to pay the cost of designing, constructing, equipping, and furnishing an advanced water reclamation facility necessary for the efficient disposal of biosolids, which project will include but not limited to demolition of the existing incinerator, installation of new sludge thermal dryers, sludge conveyance equipment, and all other ancillary systems, and any other related repairs and upgrades to the AWRF, and including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under the General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7(1), subsection 8(14), or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore. Further ordered that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under General Law, Chapter 44A. Any and all bonds or notes of the city authorized by this vote, and to provide such information, execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Martin Brophy, Treasurer, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clark.
Chairman, may I have a
Counselor
point
Farrell.
of parliamentary inquiry on a couple of things? Is it your intention to have a special meeting of the city council to approve the budget?
Yes.
And I'll address this to the councilors like Councilor Rodriguez, who have been around a while, Councilor Azak. Is there anything that would preclude, to the extent people are concerned about the timing of borrowing orders, is there anything that would preclude having the adoption of the budget as one agenda item and then a second agenda item approval of these loan orders? Is there anything?
To my
that-
knowledge.
So we would be able to, meet that, the timelines that are
So as long as it's, as long as it's in the agenda.
projected.
Yeah, as long as it's on the agenda, yeah.
And I guess to, maybe Mr. Brophy would know this, I believe loan orders have to have an affirmative 8 votes, am I correct? Marty, is that correct?
It
8
is.
votes required for
2/3,
loan
yes.
orders?
Yeah.
2/3.
That's what I thought. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The other caveat to loan orders are, when it's passed to a third reading, it needs to be advertised 10 days prior to the vote, the final vote.
So, again, Mr. Chairman, if I could, would that mean that if we were going to have a final vote on the 27th, we would have to advertise it no later than the 17th?
Correct.
And you would, Mr. Chairman,
Special meeting is planned right now for the 13th.
The special meeting is planned for the 13th?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry to stop the proceedings here. so.
Relevant point made, Counselor. I do have, Counselors, a letter from Counselor Nicastro that she asks be submitted into record. It's a bit lengthy, so I'm just going to paraphrase it, but it will be entered into the record. She says she, learned about the sludge dryer about a week ago. She had a Zoom call with CFO Clarkson, Commissioner Hill, and Councilor Farwell, learning about the proposal and the advantageous financial terms. She has some concerns about Ward 4 being a bit of a dumping ground. She would like this item postponed to a later date after her ward meeting so she can discuss this item with the ward and present it and hear the case from the ward. So that's, just the outreach from Councilor Nicastro that she did request be read into the record, and it's a ward-sensitive item, so. Councilors, anything on the item? Councilor Farwell, followed by Councilor Mendez.
Yeah, just
ward meeting.
Her ward meeting is June 1st.
June 1st, yeah. Just very quickly, both Councilor Nicastro and I reached out, and we thank you again. Councilors, one of the things we were concerned about is not only the financial impact on the city, but the environmental impact. What will the byproduct be of this sludge facility? How will it affect, if any effects are felt environmentally down in Ward 4? What's the projected budget? How much for the actual site preparation and construction, and how much for operating costs, projected operating costs? So this really looks like a straightforward, we're borrowing $34 million, but really there are a lot of issues that are, I'm sure, going to be discussed at the Ward 4 meeting on June 1st, and we rightfully should discuss, because I don't know this technology. I doubt any of us know this technology, but I want to know what's going to happen once we put this into operation. How will it affect the city, the health of the residents, the environment, and a whole host of other issues. So that was the reason why we mentioned that it would be helpful to have you at the ward meeting. I hope I can get down there. I know Councilman Minicello and I have another one that night, but the public needs to know an awful lot about this. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Clarkson.
Mr. Chairman, I was grateful to have the time with Councilor Nicastro and Councilor Farwell, and wholeheartedly agree, as I mentioned to you in my memo, that this deserves a pretty robust review. From a financial standpoint, with your indulgence, I would like to just demonstrate how financially this works for the city, because it's counterintuitive to hear you're going to borrow $35 million and save money, but I'd like to briefly demonstrate that for you. If you'd like, Evan, could you call that slide up, please? So I know you have this on your screens, and I have it committed to memory, so I won't turn my head and refer to it, but essentially the challenge for us is that right now, out of the sewer enterprise, we spend approximately $2.5 million a year out of the operating budget of the enterprise in transportation and disposal of sludge. For the folks at home, sludge is a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process that's heavily regulated and needs to be disposed of only in certain facilities. So the cost to truck it away and to dispose of it costs the sewer enterprise over $2.5 million a year. So what we did and have provided to you for demonstration purposes is, and I'll refer you to the slide that has the 17.4% principal forgiveness, because as I stated earlier with the sewer lining, we're very, very confident that we will at least get that amount. And so as you can see, in that first year of borrowing, and we will make these available for the ward meeting for residents on June 1st. That first year of borrowing with that 17.4 forgiveness, the total principal and interest would be $1.8 million, resulting in a savings in year one of nearly $700,000. If the Commonwealth increases that 17.4% to a higher number, then those savings would only increase. So because getting rid of sludge is so difficult and costly today, and the experts will tell you they certainly don't anticipate that those cost pressures are going to be relieved anytime soon. They're only going to increase. In fact, our engineer and Dave Norton, our employee, suggested that they may increase annually as much as 10%. But in order to be extremely conservative, we only increase them in this scenario by 2% a year. But even increasing by 2% a year, we believe that over the life of the payback of this loan, we could save as much as $60 million, and those are real dollars that are not going to need to be spent out of the enterprise. And so that's further reasons why we will generate retained earnings in the enterprise and be able to not have any additional pressure on rates for the citizens. So I look forward to reviewing this in greater detail, both at the ward meeting and with the council, but I really wanted to introduce that to you because this is, with this kind of principal forgiveness available, it's really a game changer for us and allows us to make investments that we otherwise may not be able to afford to make, and why I believe, in my professional opinion, this is a really important project to proceed. And that's notwithstanding the expertise that Pat brings and that he'll discuss about why this technology is appropriate. He went to California and saw it in action. But you'll hear all that, and you certainly can ask him questions. But on its face, financially, this is a very sound initiative and makes good fiscal sense.
Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you forgot the best part, Troy. We actually can sell the treated sludge. So we can make some money off of that. Who would operate? So this is a plant, or what are we building a separate building, or is this within the initial the existing complex, or what's the 34 million getting us?
So this is actually going to put two pieces of equipment into service. One piece of equipment will be the sludge dryer. The other piece of equipment that we're proposing right now would be the what we call the pyrolysis unit. It will fit within the dryers will fit within the building, the main building of the sewer plant now, where the incinerator used to stand, and the pyrolysis units will sit outside.
Okay, so they're machines we're buying.
They're machines,
essentially.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, operated by Veolia, or?
That's correct.
Okay. These things come in, I mean, it seems pretty quickly. We're buying a machine, brings it on site, within a short period of time, it's operational.
No. So to get this project, I mean, there's probably a year's worth of engineering that needs to be done to determine where those, so we have to buy 2 dryers and 2 pyrolysis units. But there's about a year's worth of engineering that needs to be done to make sure that they fit within the building, to remove the old incinerator, to update the electrical system, to get everything in the building, and set installation of the machine, installation of the secondary machine, which we put outside the building, setting a pad that will support those machines.
So you said you went to California to check one of these out.
I did.
What are the environmental impacts of these dryers?
So to be clear, I went to California just to look at the secondary machine, the pyrolysis unit. So the way that the process works, currently we ship out sludge, right? So the sludge is a 26% solid, so it's mostly liquid. The sludge goes out in trucks. We ship it down to Naugatuck, Connecticut. That's right now currently the only incinerator in New England that's operational. The first portion of the technology that we're proposing is a sludge dryer. So instead of the sludge going directly into a truck, it will go into a machine that will dry the sludge to 90%. so that it'll be 90% solid. That 90% solid will be put into the pyrolysis machine, which is basically like a high heat combustion chamber, and it reduces it to what they call biochar. That biochar is what you were speaking of. We assume it's going to about 4.5 to 5 tons a day is what we'll produce. So.
Okay, and so obviously, if we're drying something where there's going to be some ventilation of, you know, we got to heat it up, therefore something's coming out of a stack. Do we have what's coming out of that stack?
So with the two technologies together, most of the, there won't necessarily be a stack coming out of the dryer. The heat that's produced by the dryer will be introduced to the pyrolysis machine to increase the efficiency of it. So the only stack will be out of the pyrolysis unit itself. I don't have those numbers. I can get them to you. What I will say is this technology is used in Europe. There's over 100 units in Europe that are active in Europe now. And this, you know, Council Follow and I had talked a little bit about this the other day. This isn't a new thing. This issue with removing sludge has been around for 5 or 6 years. At one point, we're in talks with New Bedford. They were going to do a regional facility. We were going to haul our sludge directly to them once we shut the incinerator down. It did not work out. The people of New Bedford did not want that facility. Then it went to Falmouth, and then Falmouth was going to do the same thing. And that never came to fruition either. So this is something that we've been eyeing for a long, long time. We figured it, you know, rather than put all our stock into someone else doing it, that we would do the project in-house, and it saves a lot of the trucking. So I can get those numbers for you. I don't have them right now, and I don't have the air quality of what comes out of the pyrolysis unit. It does have a stack. It is not an incinerator, though. So.
Okay, so, all right. Are there any other of these equipment in Massachusetts?
No.
All right. So the MADEP or the EPA, I mean, they're going to have to be involved in the certification of these machines?
Yes.
Do we have any preliminary discussions of whether the DEP will sign off on something like this?
So the sludge drying process, there are sludge dryers in Massachusetts. That technology has been around for 15 to 20 years, I think. We don't anticipate any issues with the sludge dryer. The pyrolysis unit is a new technology to the United States. Like I said, there are over 100 of these units in Europe that are operational. We do not. The unit in California is in Region 8, I think it is, EPA Region 8, which is actually the most stringent region in the country. They have approved the discharge from the stack. So we don't anticipate having any issues. Like I said, it's not permanent as an incinerator, so we're hopeful that it will pass, but part of the design portion of it is to sit down with EPA and to get their okay before we, you know, advance too far.
Okay, so we get sign off before we purchase these machines?
Correct.
Okay. Now, would we be able to take on anybody else's sludge into these machines? Is there any anticipation or expectation of doing that?
It's not designed for that. We may be able to receive some sludge, but that's not the goal. So the machines are sized based on the amount of wet tons that you produce a day. They're with both machines, so we'll have 2 sludge dryers and 2 pyrolysis units. There will be room to accept other sludge, but that's certainly not the goal.
Okay. And just lastly, I saw on the paperwork provided, the city of Brockton only receives 10% of the proceeds from the sale of the sludge. Why only 10%?
That's a negotiable thing. That's currently what the plant in California receives, 10%. And it's 10% right now. It's $300 a ton. So. And that's just for one use. They're experimenting with other uses now. But as it stands now, it's $300 a ton, and we would get 10% of that.
And who gets
the other 90? We haven't negotiated that at all, so.
Who would get the other 90?
Well, it's removed entirely by the manufacturer of the unit.
Okay.
So they remove for free. So they get 90% of the product.
The movers.
If we decided to go that road, that doesn't mean we have to sell it. We can keep it. We haven't really dug into that too much, so.
What's this bio, what did you call it? Bio?
It's called biochar. Yeah.
Biochar, what's that used for?
Currently, it's used in soils. So it's pretty popular in the farming industry, I guess. But I don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay. And just lastly, maybe for Troy. Troy, if we authorize $34 million in an appropriation, is it our expectation to borrow all of that, or is this going to also be in steps?
It'll certainly be in steps, and we do anticipate that we would not need, as with the 16 million, because of the principal forgiveness, we would be hopeful that the actual money we would borrow would be significantly less than that.
You said that this is a priority for Massachusetts, or the SRF program. You said this might be one that at that 49%. Does this have that high priority like the lead, or?
We believe it could, but we know that it will get at least 17.4%, which is, so that's why I was referring you to we included the 0, 9.9, 17.4, right, and the 49 in your figures, just so that you could see the variance of the costs.
Right.
But we're very confident standing here before you that it will be at least 17.4.
Okay. All right, well, I thank you for your time, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors, there's a counselor who would like to speak who's already spoken. Is there any counselor who'd like to speak who has not yet spoken? Seeing none, Counselor Farwell.
I have just a couple of other things, and we spoke about it last week. There's only one other of these operations in the entire United States, correct?
There's one currently in operation there, and I followed up with the manufacturer after this. There's 3 installations that are currently happening right now. 2 of them in Pennsylvania, 1 of them in New Jersey. They won't give us the sites because they're private entities and they have non-disclosure agreements. So, but it is actively accepted through the APA, so, okay, the technology.
And lastly now, the projected savings, that is difficult to nail down, because if Veolia is going to operate this, they may very well want an increase in their payment each year that we give to them to operate the plant. I can't imagine that they're just going to absorb that work for nothing, and I don't know if that was factored into the projected savings.
So I had that discussion with Veolia in their prediction of what this technology, because we had actually considered some of Veolia's technology prior to this. We don't envision, and while we don't have a commitment, it doesn't seem as though it's going to be more than 1 or 2 employees. Additional employees.
But there is a cost implication.
Correct.
To be determined.
To be determined.
To be determined. So that offsets the projected savings a little bit. Councilors, what I hope we'll do is postpone this. If we recommend this favorably, it's to me, if I lived in Ward 4, it would be like a smack in the face that, well, we're going to send it forward favorably, and then we'll take another look at it, and if something's wrong, we won't do it. What I don't want is for the southeast section of the city to be known now as the sludge receptacle of southeastern Mass. And I don't know any other gentle way of putting it. I mean, the people down there have gone through a lot. I know Councilor Rodriguez lives in Ward 4. We know there used to be a landfill. We know there's been all sorts of suggestions for operations down there that met with widespread pushback. And I really think that before we do anything on this, we need to go to Ward 4 and have a meeting, let the ward councilor and Commissioner Hill and Mr. Clarkson make a presentation. So I know logistically this is tough, but it was put before us a couple of months after it really could have been advanced a little sooner. So I'll make a motion to postpone to a future FinCom meeting and allow for the June 1st Ward 4 meeting to proceed which I think will be very helpful, fleshing out a lot more details.
I second it.
Councilor Rodriguez, you had something on the
I'll
motion.
do it on the motion.
On the motion, okay. Councilor Rodriguez.
Commissioner Hill, it's actually on the documents that we have, but how much do we pay to truck the sludge to Connecticut every year?
This fiscal year, Council, I think it was $2 million. Next fiscal year, it's going to be 2.4 million, I think,
And going up?
and going up.
And if we do introduce this new system down here, will that cost be basically a savings for the city?
Yes,
Because we don't have to, no longer have to transport that.
that's correct.
That's $2.5 million.
That's correct.
Okay. I know Council Farwell actually has put a motion to postpone this, but I'm looking at the calendar right here. I think we have, as a resident of Ward 4, but I'm also pretty concerned with the taxation of the city in the sense, and if we can save a few millions of dollars, I think somehow it makes sense. But at the same time, we got to look at the calendar that we have in front of us. Our next city council meeting is on the 23rd of May, and then we have another one coming up on the 27th of June. That basically leaves us with about a month and a day for us to decide whether or not this thing makes sense or not. I think we can kind of move forward with this thing. And for some odd reason, I'm going to go to that the Ward 4 meeting, and if something comes up down the pipeline that makes this thing so unbearable in a way, I would personally come back on the 23rd and table this so that we don't borrow this. But to me, not to move this thing forward in a way that there's a possibility of just saving this city $2.5 million, plus the trucking of that sludge in the middle of our city, because it has to go from Okie Hill to the highway before it goes to Connecticut. So we're still trucking that stuff through the city in the sense, and God knows what could happen in that process. So it's not, to me, I don't see it as this, this safe way of doing things versus that safe way of doing things. It's still sludge, no matter how you look at it. And I think once it's baked, I think it's a little safer to handle than it would be in sludge form. So I, again, as a resident of Ward 4, I'm willing to, to push it forward so that we have about a month or so to come back and decide whether or not this is something that we can live with or not live with. But you know what? In the meantime, we still have the sludge to deal with. It's not like it's, let's have sludge versus not having sludge. I think it's just the way we deal with the sludge, and at the same time, saving the taxpayers around $2.5 million a year. So I'm not gonna vote in favor of postponing it. I'm gonna vote in favor of moving this forward. And I think we have a month or so to decide on this, and I would have absolutely no quorums into coming back and tabling it if we need to table it, if the vast majority of the residents of this community, especially in Ward 4, decide that this is not the best thing we can do for our area. So I would actually do that. So I would ask our colleagues to kind of keep that in mind, and as a resident of that ward, I don't have a problem with listening. But I think just moving forward, it doesn't preclude us from coming back and can it if we have to. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm going to stick to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Farwell on the motion?
Yeah, on the motion, I understand the timing of it. And that's why I get a bit resentful that this could have been broached a long time ago, could have been fully vetted. We could have had meetings in Ward 4. We could have had discussions about this. Now we're faced with a situation where if you vote favorable, by Commissioner Hill's own admission, we don't know what comes out of that incinerator. We don't know the environmental impacts. We don't really know how much Veolia is going to charge us over and above what we pay them now to operate that plant. We don't know that those savings, those projected savings, are actually hard numbers. And, you know, I'm just going to remind you, and I can't speak for anyone else, you need 8 votes. If you irritate enough people by trying to ram this thing through, you may not get the 8 votes. And am I being cautious? Yeah, because I know what those people went through in Ward 4. I used to drive a cruiser down South Main Street, and I couldn't put up with the smell coming from the plant and had to put the windows up. So let's see how the vote to postpone goes, and then we'll take it from there. That's democracy. I certainly support that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Mendez on the motion?
Yes, on the motion, just to clarify, if we were to postpone, we would have enough time if we were to pass this before the July 1st deadline?
I don't believe we would. The postponing this tonight to the next Finance Committee meeting would lead to the Finance Committee meeting on June 20th. That would require us to have 2 readings, 2 council meetings before the end of the month, one of which needs a full 10 days advertising time in advance. So I don't know how feasible that is.
Essentially postponing, we're just killing this order right now.
Correct.
I don't want to put a
Thank you.
word on it, but
Just on the motion as well.
Councilor Thompson on the motion.
We're not going to have the information regarding a lot of this until the engineering is complete. Is that correct?
That's correct. And a little point of clarity here too, Counselor. Generally speaking, we wouldn't be trying to rush anything through. The IUP list for the SRF program has traditionally always comes out in February. This year it came out last week, which leaves us very little time to do these things. And I understand what you're saying, Councilor Fowler. I really, really do. But I'm not trying to force any technology on anyone. You're 100% correct. We still need to work with the regulators. We don't exactly know if this technology is going to be accepted. We may have to move on and do something else. This is just to get the ball moving and to stay within the timeframes of the SRF program.
So there are additional off-ramps from between now and operation of this plant?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And one of the other, portions that we didn't really bring up, and I don't think we've really worked out those numbers, is through a few of our IMAs, there is a proportional share that is paid for with the other communities. I couldn't give you those percentages right now, but where this is a treatment, part of the treatment process, I do believe that they share in proportionally based on the amount of gallons that they send to the plant, so.
Right, so those IMAs that we signed over the last year or two will, all those cities, all those towns will contribute to the expense of this dryer.
They'll contribute to their portion, which in doing the numbers, it's between 10 and 15%. Not every IMA has that language, but we know that a few of them do.
Right.
So there is going to be a substantial savings on that end too, so.
It's $3 to $5 million right there. Okay, motion's on the floor. Was that to postpone?
Motion is on the floor to postpone.
Roll call vote, please.
On the motion.
By roll call vote, Councilor D'Agostino on the motion, and then we're going to roll call it.
So let's say we postpone this, and we've all heard the calendar's not our friend on this one. So let's suppose we were to postpone it. Obviously, we know that the calendar is not going to allow us to get this through for the time frame that we need. What's the negative implication that happens there? Like, is there a financial consequence? Is there
So if we don't have a loan appropriate, and I'm new to this, Counselor, so I'm not going to lie to you, but I believe that if we do not have a loan appropriation put in place with the SRF program when they ask for it, then that money that was set aside for this project will go to another project.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that. Like I said, I'm a little new to this game. So
The risk is we lose the whole opportunity.
there is a risk of that, yes.
Okay. And the other thing I'd just like to say, because I have concerns about the environmental implications of this, and obviously we don't have that information available to us tonight. I wish we did. However, because everything requires multiple readings, we do get to look at this again after tonight, you know, and if the calendar were different, if we didn't have the budget coming up so quickly, I'd say, yeah, sure, postpone it. We've got, time is on our side. Unfortunately, and with that information, that time is not on our side, the calendar is not our friend. So, but, you know, we can move it forward. We still have another chance to look at this, you know, in a week, and we can gather more information. I don't know what information you can gather in a week's time, but whatever you can get would be helpful, I think. You know, so I guess for me, I'm comfortable moving it forward only because we still have another at-bat, if you will, to look at this. It's not the final vote.
And I'd be happy to put a more robust presentation together once the engineering is done and the technology decisions have been made before we move forward with anything, to show everybody exactly what's going to go on. We're not there yet. We've selected some equipment. We hope to get it through the process with the regulators, and then once we hit that point, I'd be happy to invite the owners of these companies to come out and make a presentation as to exactly what their technologies do.
Okay, so there isn't any environmental information that you would be able to?
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I understand the environmental impacts right now.
Right, but I mean, that information's not something that's readily available fast enough for a night? Okay, all right.
I know oftentimes when you get involved with these technologies, a lot of that stuff doesn't get released. A lot of the very, very specific information doesn't get released until you procure the equipment, so.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, there's a motion made and seconded on the floor.
Mr. Chairman?
It's been requested by a roll call vote.
Just as a point of information, Section 2-86 of the ordinances of the City of Brockton. Any ordinance, order, or resolution may be passed through all stages of legislation at one session, provided that no member of the council objects thereto. But if any member of the council objects, the measure shall be postponed for that meeting. Unfortunately, we don't have legislative counsel here, but that is Section 2-86 of our ordinances. Perhaps there is a state law that usurps that language, and I would leave that to Mr. Brophy or Mr. Clarkson if that's the case, but that's our ordinance.
Mr. Brophy, Mr. Clarkson, would you like anyone say anything on that?
I didn't hear the word appropriation in there. Ordinance, order, you say appropriation.
I believe, and Marty can certainly speak to this, in fact, I had suggested to Marty earlier tonight as we were discussing this, that it's possible to do that process. The key is, though, the 10-day requirement, because it's a borrowing, is not, I believe, waivable as part of that section. So I think you could we can work with the calendars, and Marty and Tiff and Pat and I will work with the clerk tomorrow morning to try to come up with a calendar that provides sufficient time for more public review and discussion, but meets the requirements. And that was the essence of the discussion we had with the Councilor Nicastro last week, and I support that wholeheartedly. So I think just finding a way to make it work within the constraints of the statute and the ordinance is what's before us.
Thank you. All right, motion properly made and seconded for a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Azak. D'Agostino.
No.
Tavares.
No.
Texera.
Yes.
Farwell.
Yes to postpone.
Lally.
No.
Mendez.
No.
Minicello.
No.
Rodriguez.
No.
Thompson.
No.
Two yeas, 7 nays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion to postpone fails. Are there any other motions on the floor?
I make a motion to approve favorably, recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded.
On the motion.
On the motion, Councilor D'Agostino.
And I apologize because I think I misspoke earlier. This could still be, can it still be postponed at the next council meeting?
It can absolutely be postponed at the next council meeting.
And if that were to happen, does the moving it forward, this step tonight, put the calendar a little more in our favor if it were postponed at Monday's meeting?
We have more opportunities to hear this, review it, and get the amount of readings in a council setting.
Right, okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All those in favor by a hand vote of moving this in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Ordered that the following name sum be, and the same is hereby transferred as the same, was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $48,011.95 from the Department of Public Works Highway Snow Removal to the Department of Public Works Highway Personal Services other than overtime. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you for having me again. This is a transfer that's frequently done every year. We use money that's in the snow budget to offset some of our costs in our snow overtime line item in our budget.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Motion has been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Ordered that the following name sum be, and the same is hereby transferred as the same, was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $635,456 from the Department of Public Works Highway Purchase of Services to the Department of Public Works Highway Capital. These funds will be used for the purchase of snow and ice removal equipment. Invited Pat Hill, DPW Commissioner, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Hang on the motion.
On the motion.
Second first. I'm not going to withdraw it.
I second the motion, and then on the motion.
On the motion, the properly made and seconded motion, Counselor Thompson.
So I think, you know, we spoke about this issue earlier this year after that blizzard that we had, and we discussed if there were any monies left over in our snow removal fund, that we would use it to purchase, capital equipment. And so that looks like that's what's being done today. I was just hoping that you could tell the public what are we purchasing with this money, and if, you know, any other information you can provide about the equipment itself.
So the goal is to purchase 2 new sidewalk plows. The machines themselves and the attachments that come with them, whether it be a V-plow or a snow blower, the machines are $180,000 a piece. There are many different sidewalk machines out on the market right now. We have a couple of them. These are more powerful machines. We used to have a bunch of these in the city. A lot of people call them bombardiers. They're currently called Prenoths. A company called Prenoth bought the Bombardier model, the SW50. They're very narrow machines. They're very, very powerful machines, and they will resolve a lot of the issues that we had this year with snow mounding, where we were unable to get through with the equipment that we had. These machines should allow us to open the sidewalks up pretty quickly.
So are we going to get the snow blower attachment? I think. Okay.
So these machines will come with a machine, a V-plow, and a 48-inch snow blower.
So they come with all of those?
Yes.
Okay. Are these to supplement our existing sidewalk snow blower, our sidewalk equipment, or are these in replacement of?
The equipment that I have, I will maintain for as long as I can. I don't intend to get rid of it right now. These machines, like I said, they serve a need. This will give me 3 different pieces of equipment to put in the sidewalks. They all serve a purpose. This one would be very helpful on the main streets where a lot of people see, like I said, the snow mounding on the main roads, the Montello streets, the main streets, the Warren Aves.
Where the schools are, right?
Around the schools. Yeah. So it'll allow us, and they move very quickly. So it'll allow us to open up some stuff that we haven't been able to open up in the past with a lot smaller equipment, as opposed to bringing really heavy stuff over there and causing more damage.
With these 2 machines now, what are our total sidewalk plows?
This would bring our total sidewalk plows up to 13.
Are they all in operation?
Two of them are actually still waiting on parts from January, honestly. 6 of them are, 10 years old. They weren't really meant to do what we do with them, but we've kind of limped them along. We have a couple of newer pieces of sidewalk equipment that we've purchased. They're called trackless machines. They're multi-purpose machines. We considered going that route with these other machines, but we did realize that as nice as those trackless machines are, they're not powerful enough to get through some of those embankments, so.
Right, because as we discussed, the weather, the weather's getting crazier.
The weather is getting crazier. I reached out to a few other communities and asked them what they did. And they have the same thing. They have, multiple machines for different things, so.
And this is, I hope this is, this becomes, routine in the future as when we ever do get mild winters, that we do transfer monies like we're doing today into the capital fund to do exactly this in the future.
And with the big snowstorm, it was an above average winter. I think we got 58 or 59 inches of snow. The average winter is 48 inches in New England, so, or in Massachusetts. So we got a little more than we usually do. But yes, the hope is always to have a little bit of money left over and try to update some of the equipment that we have.
Right, but I mean, I saw a statistic, the 10 highest snowfalls in Massachusetts happened in the last 18 years. So, I mean, it just seems like it's becoming more of a norm here in this area. Could you talk about the street sweeper? That's another item that we're purchasing here.
So currently, we purchased a new street sweeper last year. Street sweepers are very, very expensive, as you can tell. I think it's $280,000. We have an older machine that we were replacing the other one with, so we try to keep 2 on hand to sweep the streets throughout the year. It's very difficult. It has been very difficult to do up until this year because our equipment was antiquated. The last machine that this will be replacing is like a 2001, I think. It's very costly to maintain that equipment, $30,000 to $40,000 a year, even with the new stuff. So the downtime, this will just increase the amount of streets we can do throughout the year. So.
And so you said we have 2 in operation
We have 2
today?
in operation right now. One of them is 10 years old. One of them we purchased last year.
Okay. Are we going to keep that old one in operation for as long as we can?
We'll keep that one running as long as we can, but like I said, it does get costly to make repairs on these on this equipment. $30,000 to $40,000 a year.
Oh, so. Okay. Well, that's great. I'm glad, we're making some investments in these much-needed machines, so we appreciate that.
As am I. Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. There's already a motion made and seconded on the
yep.
floor. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes.
Order that the following name sum be, and the same is hereby transferred as the same, was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $297,495 from certified free cash to the Brockton Police Department Capital Vehicles. Invited, Brenda Perez, Acting Police Chief, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Chairman, if I may briefly just discuss with you the funding source, and Acting Chief Perez is here if you have any questions on the vehicles. But the purchase, as you can see in your packet, is part of the routine replacement of patrol vehicles. But I wanted to speak to the funding source of certified free cash because that's not something you see often here. So every year, as you know, as part of the closeout of the city's books, we go through a process, and certified free cash is a snapshot as of June 30th. And the basis of it is revenues in excess of projections and funds budgeted but not spent. And as I've been saying to you for several years now, our revenue projections are always intentionally conservative so that we develop additional free cash. And then we watch those budgets closely throughout the year so that we develop and save money. The practice in Brockton has been, out of necessity, to use the entirety of the free cash every year to balance the next year's budget. I've stood here for the last 2 budgets, the last few budgets, I should say, and said to you, I would like us to get to a process where we wean the city off of free cash as much as possible to balance the budget, and not use one-time revenues to balance the budget. We're not there yet, but we're making progress. So in the budget that you'll see in a couple of weeks, I propose to use $15 million of free cash to balance the budget. The free cash certified as of last June 30th was $19,305,255. So we have more free cash than we're proposing to use to balance the budget. That's good news. And so the funding source for these police cruisers is this free cash, meaning we won't have to use budgeted funds. Those budgeted funds can go to operations, and we won't have to borrow money and incur interest costs. And so that's really important, and it represents a milestone here in the city, a very positive one. So I wanted to highlight that for you. At your next meeting, items that were filed with the city clerk today, we'll seek to use more of that free cash for some capital items. And also you'll see to fund a portion of what we committed to do in putting more money in our pension stabilization. So we're using this free cash for one-time purposes rather than creating a structural deficit in our budget that we'd have to make up next year. So I wanted to highlight that because I think that's something very positive, and that allows us to do some capital spending in ways that we have not been able to do before. Specifically as it relates to the vehicles, as noted in your packet, and again, Chief Perez is here, but these are routine purchases of police cruisers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So that's something that we do every year. We were not able to do it during the COVID year, and so we're taking advantage of a very long supply chain, and these vehicles have been ordered.
Councilors?
Motion to recommend favor.
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes.
Ordered that the following named sum be, and the same is hereby transferred as the same, was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $1,400,000 from the public property vacant and abandoned building revolving fund to the public property capital. Invited Jim Pliff, Superintendent of Buildings, and Troy Claxton, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clarkson, Superintendent Pluff.
Mr. Chairman, the vacant and abandoned building fund is something that has existed for some time. I have here for you somewhere a balance in that fund. It's a little over $2.4 million. $2,307,163. And so the Superintendent of Buildings had asked that we support this series of buildings. He can speak to the specifics of the buildings, but I can tell you that there are more than sufficient monies in that fund to fund this initiative.
Good evening, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for hanging with us.
You're welcome. Oh, I'm sorry. So over the past number of years, many buildings we've identified as, sorry, I'm just coming off. I have 2 days left before I have to.
Just for the audio.
Just for the audio. Excuse me. So we've identified a number of buildings, 7, in fact, that we feel are dangerous and need to be removed, and the owners have not. And actually 6 of those, and then one of them, a city-owned building down on the south side of Main Street that we feel is better off being removed as a liability and having just as a vacant land. And in addition to that, we have the 3 buildings we added onto the list to make a total of 10, 99 Warren Ave, and then 18 Highland Street and 26 Highland Street, which are both, all 3 buildings are part of the public safety improvements up on the old high school. So I ask that we are allowed to transfer that money to cover the cost of this demolition.
Councilor Farwell.
Yeah, very quickly, just for the record, it is important to get these down because they're fire hazards. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely fair statement.
We've had some problems with homeless people getting into, I think, either 99 Warren or Highland Street, hasn't that been an issue, or?
Yes, Counselor, actually, a big issue.
Big issue.
99 Warren Ave, the house across the street, which is 9 Highland Ave, which isn't owned by the city, but is a danger, has all the barbed wire out front. And then 18 and 26 Highland Streets both have had people breaking into them.
So, well, aesthetically and public safety wise, I think it's nice to have that revolving fund and be able to tap that for a purpose like this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Texera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. We got 312 North Main Street. That's private owned, right?
That is correct.
So even though it's private owned, the city will be able to go and tear it down.
That is correct. Mass General Laws, Chapter 143, and certain sections in there provide that if it is a building that is dangerous and unsafe, as determined by me and recorded by a Board of Survey, confirmed by a Board of Survey, we have the authority to take that building down or make it safe. And then what we do after that is then we lien the property for that amount.
So you'll pass the cost to the owner.
Yes, the cost of demolition would be then lien onto the property. And the way we code the computer is that any liens that are paid from the vacant abandoned building fund would then be put back into the vacant abandoned building fund once repaid.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And good evening, Mr. Plouffe.
Good evening. So
just kind of piggybacking on Councilor Tavares's topics. So and I looked up all of these addresses, so let's stick with the 312 North Main Street, that 3-decker.
Yes.
Private property, you said if we knock it down, then we put a lien on just the lot, right? I mean, who?
That's correct.
So now you knock down, say, let's call it a $500,000 building on a $60,000 lot. Now that $60,000 lot's a $560,000 lot. Who the hell's gonna buy that?
Correct.
So we're probably just looking at a abandoned lot for the next, who knows, however long.
A lot of times, if we take down private property where they are not able to pay off the lien, that is the case. The city can sell that property. We'll sell it for a loss. And I believe the collector treasurer does that.
So at some point we can, so is this a taking? When we, through the chapter that you mentioned, we're essentially doing a taking of that property, correct, or not?
I'm not an attorney, but based on my conversations with the attorneys, that is correct.
So now after we knock down that building, we own that lot?
No, we would not own that lot. We would put a lien on the property, and then after the normal course of collection of that lien, we would then take it when it went to land court.
Okay, so the private property owner will still own it, but there's a anticipation or expectation that they're not gonna make whatever payments they need on that land. Therefore, at some point, it's a tax taking, and we take it?
Yeah, so right now, for about a year after we take it down the building, we send out a bill. It's not no interest bearing, it's just money owed to the city. Once.
The demolition?
For the demolition.
Okay.
Once a certain period of time, it might be a year, it might be 8 months, I'd have to ask the treasurer, but they will then transfer that from a bill to a lien. And that lien would then collect interest and go onto the tax records. So then it would be due as taxes.
And then at some point, it will accrue to a certain amount where we take the property through non-payment of taxes?
That's correct.
And that happens regularly?
I would say it happens, has happened many times. I wouldn't say it's a regular situation, but yes.
Okay. I was looking at, what was it? 1053 Main Street.
Correct.
That seems already vacant. There's a little shed on that. Is that what we're knocking down, or?
No, the multifamily behind the barber shop. So there's it's a landlocked piece of property. It's the city owns it, in fact.
Okay. Just GPS showed that, Google Maps, that 1053 was that empty lot across from Italian Kitchen. That
On the same side as Italian Kitchen.
Right,
So,
right, across, what's that, West Chestnut?
yeah, there's,
It's right to the rear of that lot that you're talking about, that's recently been
Oh, okay.
So you got the dining kitchen to the north, you have that lot where people used to park.
To park, right.
It's been fenced off, there's a property right behind it.
Is, okay. So that's a North Main Street, that's a main, okay. All right.
The barber shop in the front is actually going to be going under renovation in the near future, probably within a month or so. The building behind it, where it's landlocked, you can't get to it other than right away through 1049.
Okay. So where is it? 189 Court Street, the one right at the corner of Court and Plymouth.
Yes.
That's a commercial building, was it?
Yeah, originally it was and I've not been alive long enough to remember this, but it was a assembly hall, I believe, for one of the ethnic groups in the city of Brockton way back in the day. Then it was purchased at some point, and sold, and it became a mattress maker. And the mattress maker then sold it to a quasi-charity or a public charity who owns it now, but has been renting to the wrong people.
Okay.
They tore the building apart, started doing renovations. It's vacant now. It's dangerous, actually.
Yeah, no, that's ripe to be tore down. I want to make sure that, that the brook that runs behind it's protected during any demolition process.
Yes, actually, the interesting thing about that is in front of the building, between the street and the building, there's a concrete area where there's a lot of parking that goes on. That's actually covering up the brook. So in talking with Rob May, the city planner, there's an intent at some point to daylight it, to allow the brook to run through uninhibited. So that might be a possibility. The city owns that front portion in front of the building.
Oh, we do?
Yes.
Okay. I think they have yard sales. I see them setting up yard sales or something in that area. Okay, it's going to be disappointing that a lot of these private properties will just become empty lots that would probably be susceptible to further blight in the future. So, but if they're dangerous, they got to come down. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Plouffe. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Azak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Superintendent. So just, I don't have a question, it's more of a comment. I know that my colleagues asked, has this been done before? And we have done it a few times. I believe 47 West Elm Street was possibly, we took that down.
Yes.
And also, I believe the old Kresge's.
121 Main Street.
Yeah, so we've done this a few times in the last few years, otherwise we'd be stuck with these really ugly, awful rundown buildings that bring down our neighborhoods. So it does pay to bring them down. We may not get the money that they should get, but eventually somebody does invest in them and get a nice building up and really fix up the neighborhood. I mean, 47 West Elm Street changed that whole block. So these are things I think the cities, I think we're doing a decent job with bringing them down, especially if they're dangerous.
Thank you, Council.
But something that, and one of the reasons I wanted to make this comment is I actually have an issue with rundown buildings, boarded up buildings. Even like we get some investors that'll buy these buildings and then just sit on them and not do anything for years. And that doesn't help that's not helping our city. So I'd like to, maybe with the help of my colleagues or, some of our department heads, figure out what we can do. If there's an ordinance, we can create something that, so we don't have people just buying rundown properties and just leaving them, not doing anything, maybe setting a time limit where they can actually have to invest in the property that they've purchased in the city. So, I just want to make that comment because I've seen these buildings throughout the years, and I know there was a lot of controversy when 47 West Elm Street was going to come down and we were going to have to pay, the city was going to pay for it, but it does pay off.
Thank you, Council. And on that point, some of our buildings, such as 121 Main Street, where we tore that down, and they told Kresge's, and they just built the brand new building, they did pay us back through the BRA. Substantial anyways, if not the full amount. 26 School Street, which we took down also, right across the street from City Hall, the old telephone building, that was paid off after we tore it down. Okay. So it isn't always the situation where we lose the amount of money we use to demolish it, but it's not guaranteed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Texera.
Thank you. Just to keep on the record, Mattress Maker never owned that building. It was Jimmy Cavallo. They owned the building.
Yes.
It needs to be teared down. I'm 100% with you on that page. Going back to 312 Main Street, or North Main Street, I'm sorry, North Main Street. Did the city reach out to the landlord?
Yes, the city has been in contact with the owner. There is, and this is something that I do with all my demolitions, is I go forward with my demolitions and put them on the demolition list, and I work towards demolition so I can keep the pressure on to make sure these buildings are gone. The 312 North Main Street, the owner has engaged a contractor to demolish the building. That contractor has applied for a permit, but has not provided the correct paperwork from the DEP, because that building is suspected to have asbestos in it. And so when the building's removed, it has to be removed in a certain fashion and with approval from the Department of Environmental Protection. And the contractor that's applied for that permit a month or 2 months ago has still not provided that information. So we are putting that pressure on to say that we're going to be taking that down because it's a dangerous building, it's a blight on the city if it's not taken care of. I understand that the owner has had some issues retaining contractors, whether they didn't want to keep the contractor around or whatever the reasoning was.
Did the city try to work with the owner?
Yes, what we do is we order the demolition of the building because of the danger. When we say order, it's not meant to be confrontational. The order is based on what the general law states. So we order the building to be made safe, to be demolished. And then we let the owner, if the owner can, remove the structure in that situation. Most of these buildings that we're dealing with, the owner can't or hasn't removed it. The one about North Main Street is a special case where they may be doing it, but if I pull off my pressure and I stop the proceedings, there's a possibility it could sit there for a lot longer. And that's what happened with 26 School Street. As we put the pressure on, nothing ever happened. Nothing came into fruition. We pulled it off one point and didn't demolish it because the owner said, oh yeah, I'll take care of it. Never did. So then we had to put it back on, and that's when we went through the last process, and we ended up taking it down. So it's a possibility that one may come to fruition with the owner, but I don't hold my hat for all those situations. Because I've seen too many times where we've been told, oh yes, we're going to do that, and they don't do it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Plouffe.
Yes, Counselor.
The 312 is the building that we just had that massive fire not too long ago.
That's correct. It was, I don't know the date, but I think it was either last fall or...
No, I remember it pretty well because we actually have come up several times talking about the fact that there were 18 families that were basically left homeless with the fire. But I know the owner of that property pretty well. And I don't feel comfortable with the city technically jumping onto the fray of interfering with what he wants to do with that building, because he's pretty much engaged with this building still, to a point where he wants to reduce the number of apartments that he actually had in the place to make it a little smaller in the sense. We've got plenty of other issues to deal with in the community, and this is basically news to me in terms, when I saw this order come down the pipeline, I didn't think this building was part of it because the fire just happened. And the guy is still pretty much engaged in fixing or trying to resolve the problem himself. So I think it makes sense for us not to get involved with private matters in a way where the owner is still pretty engaged in fixing the problem. I think one of the things that we need to do is that if he's having a problem with individuals who are contractors to work with them, I think that's what the city is here for, to basically provide to lend a hand in the sense to help him go through the process of fixing what he needs to fix. It makes very little sense that we're putting city resources into a private property that the owner is still pretty engaged in terms of getting it fixed. So I actually don't feel very comfortable with having this particular address on the list of these properties that we're talking about. The building that Councilor Texero was talking about has been vacant technically for about 10 years or so, on and off, on and off, and off. This is basically a few months. I think we can actually kind of work in making that building as safe as it needs to, where the city can kind of demand certain things to make it safe. But I don't think it's something that we ought to jump on in terms of, especially when we do have an engaged homeowner that actually wants to work to fixing. Because I actually saw some plans that he has in terms of, try to get that process moving. I think we've got, bigger X to grind in other places and stuff like that, and not pick fights with individuals who are engaged and willing to work with us to get the problem solved.
Thank you for your comment, Councilor. I wouldn't say we're picking fights. We do have a dangerous building after a large fire, and we have to make sure that the public safety is taken care of immediately.
But has that building been condemned?
It's been there's no terminology as condemned in the building code. It's declared dangerous, unsafe.
Right.
And that
but,
has been
I
declared
mean, this
dangerous.
building is technically dangerous and unsafe. I mean, these ceilings, the ceiling could just come down and it just do some serious damage to some of us sitting here. I mean, we see what goes on in the corner of the building when it comes to rain coming down. So, but is it, when we say a danger to the community, is it something that could be basically mitigated in a way so that he doesn't have to go through the fact that if he wants to keep if the building is salvageable in a way, that he can salvage his building versus having it, taken down,
Yes,
by the city itself.
Sorry, Councilor. We have communicated to the owner that if they were to receive information from an architect engineer, drawings showing that they can salvage that building, that they can. The communication we got from the architect that was engaged by the owner was that he wasn't comfortable putting his name and stamp on the renovation of that building, and that they suggested tearing it down. The contractor that is being engaged right now that has not fulfilled the permit is a contractor that's going to be demolishing that building.
But you're not going to go out and start demolishing this building tomorrow, basically. I mean, next week after this order gets approved.
No, Councilor. This order, the demolition of these buildings has to go out to bid. We have the bid documents ready to go out Wednesday, and it's going to take a month and a half to 2 months to get going with any demolition. So we're not going out next week to demolish a building.
Yeah, because, again, I mean, the fire ripped through that building not too long ago, and, I mean, the guy is a pretty decent guy that owns that building, is a pretty, outstanding guy in this community in a way that I've known for a long time, that supposedly does what he needs to do with his business, with his business and buildings in the sense. I think it makes very little sense for us to push comparing what is going on North Main versus what goes on, for instance, on Court Street. And that the two are not in the same boat as far as I'm concerned. And this guy should be given every single opportunity that he has to either take the building down himself and use the property for whatever purposes, but not to be pushed by the city to do something that he feels is not going to be justifiable for what it is. Because, I mean, let's look at it this way. You go down as a city to take it down, there's going to be a price to it that's different than his own price if he took it down. Because of the whole, what we paid to take buildings down is very different what private individuals are paying to take buildings down. So if you take it down as a city, then this guy is basically he's going to get settled whatever prices that you come up with. And that's why I think we ought to give him every single opportunity to do that, either by himself, for himself, or have an opportunity to fix that property.
Thank you, Councilor. I would say that a dangerous and unsafe determination on a building is not an indictment on the person that owns the property.
Right.
It is the property themselves and the property and the condition that it is in. That roof is missing. It's collapsed down into the third floor. The third floor might have even collapsed a little bit down to the second floor. There's portions of the wall that are bowing out onto the street and over to the driveway. I understand that we want to give everybody the opportunity, every opportunity to take care of their building.
I know, but Commissioner,
Yes.
this is not something that's been going on for a year or two. This is something that just happened not too long ago. I'm saying I think we need to afford this man an opportunity to basically tell even some of us that, no, I can't do this anymore, or I want the city to do this, or I'm going to pay somebody to tear it down, versus just us assuming that it's going to get added to a list of some of these buildings that we've had issues with in this community for quite some time. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor D'Agostino.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I just want to make sure I heard something that you said right. And again, I'm asking about the same property as Councilor Rodriguez was asking. Did I hear you say that the owner actually is already looking at taking it down? Did I catch that right, or did I mishear you?
No, that's correct.
So, all right, so this is what I'm just curious about, and again, this being new to me. If we know the owner's already gearing up to take it down, why are we stepping in?
We step in when the buildings are unsafe and they haven't been taken down in a period of time. So the general law says, when we determine a building to be dangerous and unsafe, the owner has until 12 noon of the day following that notice to begin to make that building safe.
Okay.
So we go through a process where we'd have to deem the building unsafe, and really it's a short timeline statutorily. I'll give a short story regarding another one of the properties around here, and Councilor Castro's not here today, so, but should be interested to talk about this property down in her ward. It's on 1 Millette Street.
Okay.
1 Millette Street was dangerous and unsafe because it has no roof. All I had were 2 gables sticking straight up. They were tied back to the roof with a simple 2x4. We afforded the owner, because the owner would purchase the building in its condition, but we afforded the owner time and time again to go to the zoning board to get permission to go back to rehabilitate that building. We're denied. Went to the planning board, sent back to the zoning board, denied. I believe there might have been even a 3rd zoning board case that were denied. And we gave every opportunity for that person's building to be revitalized, because we weren't going to take it down. But it is dangerous. It was, 2 gable ends.
Right.
2 months ago, in a windstorm, one of the gables fell down into the middle of the street. Okay. It was cleaned up before we even knew about it.
Right.
Then about 3 weeks ago, we got a phone call from the fire department in the middle of the day, another windstorm. The other gable fell, hit the building next to it.
Jeez.
So while a fire-damaged building is fire damaged and only a short time ago, or a building is unsafe for a period of time, the longer we let things wait, as long as we let people try to work it out, the longer we risk having other collapses or other damage or harm to people.
Okay. And so, I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So he's been given the notice and the opportunity, the at least statutory opportunity, if not longer, to address it, and just has not met those timelines.
That is correct. The contractor that's applied hasn't applied with the correct information, even though requested to do so.
Okay.
To give you the idea of the process, any building you want to demolish, whether it's a good building or bad building, you have to do an evaluation of the building and see if there's any asbestos in there. And then you have to abate that asbestos before they can demolish the building.
Okay.
In 2 of these cases, 312 North Main Street and also 507 Pleasant Street, they are both collapsed.
Right.
The 507's roof is collapsed into the building. It's it's dangerous to go in there and abate it in the normal fashion. Right. 312 North Main Street would be the same thing. It's too dangerous to abate it. There might be a process that would be lengthy and time-consuming to do to try to remove it all. The easiest and best way to remove these buildings is through a bulk removal of the building in a certain fashion, where you're spraying everything down with water and putting it into lined containers, and we actually ship it out to Ohio. Okay. There's other places, other states that accept hazardous waste like that. But they have to go through this process to demolish it, and they have to get approval from the DEP, and have to be special people that can do it.
Okay.
It just can't be any contractor that decides, yeah, I'm going to take asbestos out and put it in a container. They have to have this approval. So the information to the contractor was, receive that information from the DP, provide us with the work letter, and we'll be all good. This isn't the final step, it's just one of the steps, one of the cogs in the wheel.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't aware of the process, so I appreciate that. But the long and short of it is, he's been notified that the clock has been ticking, and, you want to be able to be ready to move forward if you have to, basically, because it's unsafe, and we don't want to repeat what happened in Ward 4, basically.
Correct, and if the homeowner and the contractor steps up and they provide their things that are necessary, we issue them a permit, they go take care of it, or if they provide architectural drawings that say they can revitalize the building, and they do that next week, or in a short period of time, have no qualms about issuing permits and allowing them to do so.
Okay. All right, thank you. I wasn't aware of the process involved in something like this, so thank you for clarifying that for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Tavares.
Yes.
Councilor.
Yes, thank you for being here today. Actually, I just have a couple questions for you. Because I know 3 weeks ago, I spoke to the wife of the owner. I totally know they kind of work on the process to fixing it, or like find the contractor, the right person to work on it. And in the meantime, they've been working under a lot of pressure because those tenants have been lived there before. They went through the court process. Even some tenants got their own lawyer, try to work with the insurance, try to find a process the way they can fix it. Right now, he's right in the middle there with a lot of issue right now. And then, I'm agree with my colleague Moses Rodriguez. I think the city should, kind of really give him more time and try to find some resource or some kind of mentorship, with this process. I totally believe it's unsafe for the city, but on my own opinion, I think the city should, kind of find some certain resource or give him more time to kind of work on and just set a goal, say, because he's under a lot of pressure right now with the tenant, with the city, is a lot. And at the end of the day, I think the city should sit down with the landlord, try to understand it and comprehend the situation. This is my own opinion, basically, because I know they going through a lot right now. Instead of just give them more pressure, just say, I know he's under a lot of pressure. Deal with it, I think 18 or cup tenant, whatever. It's just, that's my own opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor.
I hope you guys taking this in consideration. Have a sit down with him, say that, hey, if your city has any resource, what can you guys be able to help or provide or mentorship?
Sure. Thank you. And,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I address something that I made not a mistake, but I wanted to clarify with something with Councilor Texera. Years ago, probably going back to about 1992, I worked for a mattress seller in West Bridgewater. And I think this is prior to your owning the company, but Mattress Maker was in that building.
It was.
They used to manufacture the mattresses in there. I went over there and picked up tens of mattresses, hundreds of mattresses from the location. But I think that was prior to you. That was the 189 Court Street. Thank you.
Counselor Tavares, you're all set?
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Azak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I used to call them that too. So I'd been in that building many a times, and we got all our mattresses back in the 70s, I think, from them. So that's before the great mattress the new mattress maker.
Right.
So first of all, I have to tell you, a huge part of our community is going to be so happy that 507 Pleasant Street is going to be coming down. That has been an eyesore, and it has cost the city money for the past 9 years. I am constantly calling. We've been cleaning and leaning forever, and there's no way, and I don't care how much it's gonna cost us, it needs to come down, and that area needs to be cleaned up because it's dangerous. It's become a public safety issue. So that's definitely, for that and North Montello, those two properties, we've been waiting for years for them to come down. So I will be very happy and hopefully move as quickly as you'd like on them. I will be right there, praying or, a lot of these properties, we need to really clean them up and whatever.
The sledge.
I'll be right there with you. Honestly, we've had the Board of Health out there regularly at Pleasant Street. We are constantly cleaning it. And the owner, this one has a crazy story. I think the owner bought it and then left the country and passed away. And now it's, I don't even know if the family members are even still involved, but,
There are, Council, a couple of daughters that I believe live over on the east side, and they're very willing, they were willing if able to take care of the building, but I don't believe they're able.
they're able to. So in this case, I think we have to figure something out, because buildings like this are really what's bringing the city down. And if we don't help move the process by cleaning them up, people will just sit on them for another 20 years. I mean, this has been vacant for way over a long time, 15, 20 years maybe it's been vacant. So we need, whatever you need from us, I know I'll support you on it. We need to clean up the city, so whatever you need. And we shouldn't wait, because I remember waiting. It was your predecessor, Jim Caseri. At one point, we had a bid to bring one building down, and then we waited, and then the cost went up. I remember that. I don't remember which building, but we shouldn't wait, because I think the longer we wait, the more money it's going to cost the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors, the chair would look favorably upon a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion is properly made and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you.
Resolved to have Tim Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks, appear before the Brockton City Council Standing Committee on Finance to discuss efforts for the springtime cleanup and opening of athletic fields and parks in the city of Brockton. Further resolved to have Mr. Carpenter give an update on the plans and timelines concerning repair and rehabilitation of multiple city of Brockton parks and playgrounds. Be it further resolved to have Mr. Carpenter report on the methods and rules and regulations used for permitting groups to use the city parks and athletic fields. Invited Tim Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks.
Mr. Superintendent?
Evening,
Thank
good evening,
you.
councilors. So, traditionally, in terms of our preparation of ball fields, we like to try and do that as early in the year as possible. Conditions don't always allow for that. We use what I would consider some heavier equipment, and sometimes you'll end up doing more damage than you do good. Permits generally start April 1st, and people like to be on those fields April 1st, whether we've been able to complete that maintenance or not. So, at this point, we have basically gotten through all of the ball fields, soccer fields in the city at least 2 or 3 times. Everything's been lined for opening days. Everything's been lined for the weekly games. That's where we stand sort of on our general maintenance and our spring cleanup. In terms of the permitting process, I've provided to you all the permits that we offer through my office. All of them are available online. There is a $25 application fee for all associated permits. And if you'd like, we can go over some of the park renovations that are going to be funded through the ARPA. At this point, the city I've been working with Mr. Pilata, who is the ARPA Construction Projects Manager. He and I have met a couple of times to discuss park projects. Right now, the focus really is on the Cosgrove Pool. Recently, the city, I believe, has hired someone that they're calling the house doctor, who basically will do a lot of the survey work for improvements to the parks. At this point, though, that is a recent addition to the team, and I haven't had a chance to meet with that person quite yet.
All right, counselors? Counselor Rodriguez?
Well, it was my resolve, so. Mr. Carpenter, how are you?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Do you know how many soccer fields we have in the city that's actually used for rental in the city?
So under the care and control of the park department, we have O'Donnell's, we have Snow Park, we have East Junior High, and we have the fields behind the B.B. Russell School, Paul Mentor's Playground.
Okay. So let me ask you something. What process do you use to determine who gets these fields and who doesn't get these fields?
So the Park Commission has had the longstanding policy that youth sports get first crack at permitting for all field space. So generally, that's how it goes, is it'll go to youth sports if there's space available beyond the permitting for the youth organizations. Then it is opened up to adult organizations.
And when you say youth, you're talking about what ages?
18 and under, sir.
18 and under. What about the fact that we've had many soccer leagues in this city that in the past were using fields, now they have lost their ability to use those fields?
Again, some of that is determined on youth applications. So recently, for example, we've had more requests from New Heights Charter School because they don't have any fields available to them. So we've had some additional youth requests from them. Cardinal Spellman still has youth requests, and then obviously Brockton Public Schools is allotted field space as well.
But that should not affect your weekend use of those fields, right?
Generally speaking, those are Monday through Friday permits.
Right, so, but I have received numerous complaints by some, some folks that have been in leagues in this city for quite some time who actually had the use of fields here in this community that are no longer able to do that because they actually now have to travel to Bridgewater in order to continue to play on the league. So what do you say to those folks? Sorry, we can't accommodate you anymore because some, a new group decided to come in and bring in a youth soccer league versus someone who's had the permits in the city for years and years to go?
Well, I'm not exactly sure which league you're speaking of, but there was a vote of the Park Commission back in October of last year in regards to adult use behind the B.B. Russell School at Paul Mentor's Playground. As you are very aware, sir, there's been years and years and years of issues there with the neighbors and having to deal with some issues on the weekends. The school department, multiple complaints about the condition of the school on Monday morning. Cases of beer left on of empties left on the front doorstep of the B.B. Russell School. So the Park Commission did vote this last, I believe it was October, not to have adult sports at that facility. So that has limited the amount of fields available to adult organizations, at least for this year.
Well, this is, I got a text here from somebody from the Brockton Sunday League.
Who has a permit at East Junior High?
They do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There was also, I don't know if it's a report, but, and I talked to Mayor Sullivan about this, and he has no idea what I was talking about, to be honest with you, but somebody said that the mayor actually told you not to rent out the fields to some of these individuals. Listen, I'm just telling you what, I don't believe it. I talked to the mayor about it. It didn't exist, but I'm just telling you what the rumor out there is, that you were told not to rent out these fields to these leagues that actually play here in the city of Brockton.
Sir, my job is to utilize field space without damaging the fields. That's my job. That's what I do.
But there's no attempt on your part as far as to kind of exclude these individuals from renting these fields?
No, sir, I don't exclude anyone.
Okay. Finally, several, actually, I can say several because it's been at least 3 years, this council approved a borrowing of $1.5 million to bring in an artificial turf field here in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I do emphasize 3 years. Why is it that it's taken this long for us even to go to plan, to move it to the next phase in terms of getting this done?
Well, as you know, because it was under your administration as mayor that was initiated, the initial plan was, that you had drawn up was for Paul Mentor's Playground, which I think probably, might not have been the great choice. We did think about East Junior High. We've had some recent conversations with the school department about that. But I think working with the mayor's office, I think we may try and shift our focus again to a different location. Again, determined on parking and whatnot, and appropriate area to utilize. So those are still ongoing conversations. And as you know, sir, the 1 point, I'm sorry, was it 1.3? I can't remember off the top of my head, 1.3, I believe, won't completely build a field. It costs much more than that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it's 3 years.
I understand, sir.
I mean, when it gets to a point where we got to get moving with these particular things, because if we had one of these artificial fields done, we could run, 20 games a day on these things, and it wouldn't feel it in a sense. It would take care of a lot of the problems that we have.
Yep.
So is there any way we can kind of push this along so we can at least get? I know that it might. I think it was 1.5 that actually we had anticipated. But there's some other ARPA monies that we've talked about that could augment it or do whatever we need to do to move this thing forward. But we need to do something in this community, because it's gotten to a point where some of us that live in this community, all we do is hear gripes and complaints about people saying, look, I was, you're a youth and from what? Up to 18, but when you're 19, what are you going to do? All of a sudden you lost your ability to participate in this sport or participate in this particular thing. It's just not a fair process to a lot of the people that we're dealing with. So the cutoff to me makes very little sense in the sense because I broke my ankle playing soccer when I was 30 years old. So it doesn't really kind of go from 0 to 18. It continues beyond that to a lot of us in this community. So just to sit back and wait to see if something would happen down the pipeline isn't really going to work. And we've got a system, a city that's very lively when it comes to that particular sport, but it's up to us to basically get these places in place so that we can accommodate the needs that we have in this community. And that's the issue that some of us are having is that, we had a conversation not too long ago about the field being down at the Arnold School that we had talked about. That's in the back burner somewhere. It's not moving anywhere. We've got these fields that are, we had talked about moving forward no matter where it is. Because no matter where you put these fields, somebody's going to have an issue with it. It could be the birds are flying over it or whatever the deal might be. So we have to decide, well, what we're going to do, but do it. Instead of just saying, well, hopefully these people will go away. They're not going away. And these kids are getting, the 18-year-olds are turning 19 and the 17s are turning 18, 19, so they're going to be here. And it's up to us to basically do what we need to do to provide the spaces, because an 18-year-old in the soccer community and a 19-year-old are basically brothers and sisters. They're in the same level, the same league, the same ideas and things like that. Or even going back, looking at a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. So there's not really that much of a difference as far as skills and things like that. So when you get the cutoff where, yeah, you can play here until you're 18, but once you're 18, hopefully you don't end up in Plymouth somewhere.
Well, maybe I misspoke, but the 18 and under considered youth is because the Park Commission has voted not to charge youth leagues. So 18 and over is considered adult, and so there is a fee. So let's say you're in a league that rents one space. We'll use the Sunday League, for example. So they've rented a space at East Junior High every Sunday from, I think their permit started middle of April through November 1st. So that's a $500 fee. So that's where the 18-year-old cutoff comes in. So it's not that we're saying, oh, you're over 18, you can't play here anymore. It's not the case at all. I think when we get O'Donnell's fully online, that will relieve some of that pressure as well.
So when is that coming online?
So I'm hoping to completely open that up sort of the end of June, but the winter was not kind to that new turf. So I'm hoping that when that comes fully online, again, that relieves some pressure there.
But I want to make sure that it stays clear here, because some of us that are out in the community, we get the what kicked out of us on a regular basis because individuals are looking for things to do in this community, and there's not a great deal of opportunities for them to do what they need to do in these fields. And we keep getting those complaints on a regular basis saying, when are you guys going to move forward and do something in the city when it comes to soccer in this community?
Well, and to be clear, the field at the Arnone, that's on school property. That has nothing to do with the Park Department, Park Commission. That's the E.B. Keith School, field, which is by trust left solely to the discretion of the school department. So I can't speak knowledgeably about that entire process, sir.
No, I'm not saying for you to speak on that
understand.
process. I'm saying opportunities.
I
These opportunities to have space that we're not getting, and it creates a problem in the community for some of us. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Right, and sort of in my brief tenure here, I mean, O'Donnell's was always the home to Pony Colt. We've completely taken the baseball field out. I mean, we are trying to address the need for more space for soccer fields. We've taken the T-ball softball field out of the Hillstrom complex so that there's more, I mean, again, that's going to youth because that's who put in the permit request. But again, so we are trying to address that issue incrementally, but finding enough space for a full-size soccer field in existing park structures is not easy.
But it was fine 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So what changed?
The only thing that has changed, sir, is the one organization that has not been permitted at Palmenters. Other than that, the requests are essentially the same.
But so what happens to that organization? That's what I'm trying to figure out. If they can't use the field that they used to use, or they used it, let's say they used it 2, 3 years ago, and they can no longer use it, and we ran into this issue on a regular basis where teams were being blamed for some of the activities at Pickfield that had nothing to do with the players themselves or the leagues themselves, because we know the users and the abusers of that area as well has nothing to do with soccer leagues or soccer. You know, the homeless folks, they live in that park, and you've got all kinds of issues going on in that park that has nothing. It's easier just to point the finger at the soccer guys. So you're telling me right now that that field, as it is, because there's no soccer being played there, that all of a sudden the problems that we had at Parmenta is no longer existent?
And to be clear, sir, I believe that the vote by the Park Commission was simply to only allow youth sports at Palmenters. Didn't prohibit anyone from putting in a request at another field.
So what I'm trying to figure out, what happened to the adults that used to play at Parmenta? What did we do to accommodate them?
You know, for a long time that we did not receive permit requests from the Sunday League. But this year, the Sunday League has sort of reestablished, and they're playing over at East Junior High.
So basically, every adult league that you know of has been accommodated in the city. Is that what you're saying?
No,
The leagues themselves.
The only one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Brockton Amateur Soccer League that used to be we did not receive a permit request from them this year.
They ceased to exist, or they're still?
I don't know, sir. We did not receive a permit request from them this year.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you.
Let me ask you something. I know you said that the park commissioners voted on what they voted on. How clear of a process is as far the application process? I know you showed us a copy of the applications that you dish out here. How clear is that in terms of people knowing what the process is to go about applying for these particular things?
So we always start our youth permitting process right around February 1st, somewhere in there, first, second week of February. And we will reach out to the youth organizations that have requested a permit the year before and tell them, hey, you know, we need your permit request application by, you know, February 15th. So we will utilize our time to permit all of those youth organizations that we would get requests from. And then generally speaking, it'll open up by March 15th to adult organizations.
But we are working to accommodate the young adults that play on these leagues as well.
Yes, we will accommodate we will do, again, sir, my job is to get the most use out of the fields without damaging the fields. That's my job. And that's what I do, whether it's youth, whether it's adult, as long as if I can utilize the space to the best of its ability to maintain its health over the long term, that's what I'm going to try and do.
Okay.
And if it means youth organizations are permitted Monday through Friday, let's say at Snow Park, where New Heights Charter is playing, Monday through Friday, we have an adult organization in there on Saturday and another one in there on Sundays.
So when you're talking about youth organizations, you're not talking about me going out and all of a sudden decide I'm going to create or form a youth soccer team to come up to you and says, no, I demand that you give me a field because I just created a youth soccer.
So for youth organizations.
It's got to be like organizations, not necessarily individuals just deciding.
So we ask for a certificate of insurance for all of our youth organizations to ensure that they are servicing the youth of the city of Brockton.
And the youth from the city?
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to reserve any other questions that I have, and I'm going to let my colleagues chime in if they so have a question to ask.
Raise your hand and we will circle back to you, Counselor. Counselor Texera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. I got a question and concern. We got that I know of, a few teams that goes in place outside the city. But they live in the city, they work in the city, they pay tax in the city, so they should use the field in the city, as long as they play by the rules.
So did they put in a permit request, do you know?
I believe they did. Not 100% sure, but I believe they did.
All right, so if it's a scheduling issue, that would be the only reason someone would not get a permit, was if they had requested a day and time that had already been permitted either to a youth organization, which takes precedent, or another organization put in their application before them. Other than that, I permit everyone that comes before me with an application request. Those are basically the two determining factors. Is the field available? Essentially, that's it. Is the field available?
Okay. I'm going to pick back on my colleague, Moses Rodriguez, a little bit about pickback. So the beer, the bottle, the empty bottle, the needles. But the first one that will get blamed, it'll be the soccer players. Even though, I'm not gonna say they saint, but they're not. But if we can work with them to make sure this is your responsibility, because we cannot blame everything on them. Not to show the permit, but you go surround that park. There's a lot more that goes into that park than just a bottle of beer.
I understand that, sir, and I'm not casting dispersions on anyone. And I would argue that my office and the Park Commission worked for 4, maybe even 5 years. DPW helped us out. They closed off Oakland Ave. I mean, we had issues with people parking cars in front of people's driveways. We had all kinds of, and so DPW would bring up signs every Friday afternoon to, shut off, I think it's Oakland Street or Oakland Ave, so that on Saturdays and Sundays, no one would make sure that they would park. I mean, we've worked to try and have adult sports at that particular site for years, sir. And it has been a struggle. And the Park Commission, again, it's the Park Commission, voted last April to allow youth sports only at Palmenters.
So my question is, what can we do to make sure that we treat those leagues the same way as baseball, basketball, or softball? that they get a place to go, because it comes down to safety. So if they haven't, you know, if I don't have a park to go play my Sunday leagues, or just spend the afternoon, my friend playing soccer, what are they gonna do? They'll end up in the bar, or they'll do something to say, you know what, I have nothing to do, so I'm gonna do this. So by working together with the league, make sure they gotta be responsible also. This is your responsibility. This is the rules. Are you guys willing to follow the rules? This is what we wanted to do. So what can we do together to make sure that they get that permit, that we don't have to go through this next year?
And again, sir, with all due respect, I feel like I have worked with that particular organization there for years, exactly the way that you are describing. And there was no, if I didn't receive an application for a permit, then I can't permit that group. If I don't get an application, there's nothing I can do about that. And I can speak frankly, honestly, and open with you that I did not receive an application from that particular organization for use this year.
What's the future of the city building a turf fields, soccer field in the city? Like our colleague Moses Rodriguez said, we got about 1.5, right?
Yep.
So what can we do? You go to town of Weymouth, Whitman, they all got the turfs. And we are a city of 105, 110,000 people in the city, and we can afford one. We're just looking for one.
So, you know, obviously there's the money available that Councilor, well, then Mayor Rodriguez got set aside. When we find that perfect location, we can move forward and find the funding, we can move forward with that project. And then there's the one down at the E.B. Keith School, so, or E.B. Keith Field behind the Arnone School. So, you know, in theory, there could be two here in the city, not to mention Marciano.
You say perfect location. When can we find a perfect location? You go back and say perfect location. What's the perfect location?
If you and Councilor Rodriguez and the mayor and Troy and I want to sit down and talk about a proposed location, I would love to do that.
We'll be glad to.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor D'Agostino, followed by Councilor Mendez.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us. It's such a long evening. So I wanted to just talk to you. You and I have talked in the past about staffing, and that, you know, sometimes, and in case everybody's not aware, there are several school fields that the Parks Department actually maintains as well, in addition to the other parks that are separate from schools. And that was kind of how we ended up talking about that. So staffing-wise, where are you? Have you been able to get any additional staffing? Are you going to propose it this year? Are you staffed adequately?
So currently I have, now I'll speak, technically the guys that work at the golf course technically are part of the Parks Department. But I'm going to speak just on, I will call it park side. So currently I have five employees on the park side, but I do have one employee out on long-term workman's compensation. I don't have.
Is that included in the 5? I'm sorry.
That is included in the 5. So technically, right now, I'm running a staff of 4 on the park side.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm running a staff of 4 on the golf course side.
All right. So you've got 4 people to maintain
Approximately 1,200 acres.
all across the city.
That's including the cemetery, so I should take the cemeteries out of there. So I'm down to about 900 or so acres.
So we get 900 or so acres of property spread throughout the city and in various different parts of the city, school fields, et cetera. I mean, I guess what I'm getting to is, because, you know, and you have talked about it sometimes, I've gotten people that have said, geez, you know, could they maintain the fields better, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously it comes down to bodies as part of it. I mean, that's not all of it, but if you don't have enough people. So I guess is 4 enough? And if it's not, what number is enough?
You know, I think as a crew of 8 would do a phenomenal job. A crew of 10 would be the best.
Right.
But I would need machines well beyond what I have now. I would need vehicles well beyond what I have now. So the associated cost not only is the staff, the benefits, all of that, but it's also the additional cost of vehicles, equipment, that kind of stuff, that makes that kind of department almost out of reach.
Okay, all right.
I don't even have the maintenance facility to house all those vehicles, to be honest with you, sir.
Okay, so even if you had the vehicles and the bodies, you wouldn't have the physical location to house them at? Okay, all right. Yeah, and I know we had some discussions about this, and I kind of hadn't had the chance to catch up to see where you were, if there had been any progress, which it sounds like the answer is no on that. And that kind of gets to some of what our discussions were of. Without the equipment, and certainly without the bodies, it's kind of hard for you to do the top quality work that I'm sure you'd like to be doing.
Correct.
You know? Okay, all right, thank you. That's really all I wanted to ask you about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Mendez.
Yes, hi. So it's also golf season, and I always thought it was a great thing to live nearby the golf course. And I've actually received complaints from the neighbors there in the area that the golf ball has broken a window, hit the neighbor on the face, that they're afraid, you know, it's the weather's starting to get nice and beautiful, but they can't let their kids play outside because they're afraid that the ball is going to hit a child and hurt them. Have you heard of these complaints and what can be done to address it? I thought it was crazy.
So I have heard the complaints. Unfortunately, the success of the golf course doesn't guarantee the skill of the golfer. But no, we are, and it's not really a joking matter. I'll be honest with you, it's not. It's an unfortunate condition. So we have taken several steps over the past couple of years. We've planted over 13 trees, but as you know, trees take time to grow. We've built 2 new tee boxes, hoping that moving the tees further away, these houses are down the right-hand side of our 11th hole, hoping that moving the tee boxes further away would help eliminate that issue. Unfortunately, neither of those things have worked. So we are right now working with the designer who did the driving range netting up at Leo J. Martin, which is a DCR course up in Needham, to put together the bid specs for what would be 85-foot poles and a screen system to protect approximately 250 to 300 feet of the right-hand side of that hole. So we're hoping that that design is done here relatively soon. We can get that project out to bid and avoid this situation in years to come.
That would probably be the soonest that would take into effect next golf season, you would think?
It really depends on how soon the contractor could do it.
Do we have the money in the budget to get that done right away if it gets approved?
So I've spoken with Mr. Clarkson extensively and the mayor on this, and hopefully we will have enough money in retained earnings to undertake the project.
Do you know approximately how much we're looking at?
The preliminary estimate, and this was probably 2 years ago, was about $145,000. So at this day's rates, you're probably looking closer to $200,000 to $225,000.
So you've already been looking into this for about 2 years and still...
So again, our initial thoughts were to try and take the steps of investing a smaller amount of money in these new tee boxes, further away from the area that was being affected, thinking that it might, in the long run, save the city a substantial amount of money. And unfortunately, again, that didn't work.
Yeah, it seems to be a very big problem for them because They really don't come out. And when they can come out, because it's no longer golf season, it's a winter, so
Right. Nope, it is definitely something we are working on right now.
they'll be very happy to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Carpenter.
Evening.
So you briefly touched on O'Donnell, so I was just wondering, you know, I drive by it all the time. It looks great, nice and green. You said it's coming online at the end of June. Can you just tell me about O'Donnell, the difficulties you said over the winter?
Yep.
Just explain kind of where we're at now with that.
You know, the industry standard generally is about 2.5 years before you want to let people really use your field. So we did a substantial overseeding in the fall last year. That irrigation system will be online here next week. So it was a difficult winter. We did have a lot of snow mold out on that field. We didn't get the greatest catch of seed in the fall seeding that we did, so we've aerated that field, seeded it again, and I'm hoping that we have significant germination in time for, like I say, mid to late June opening for it.
So that's conditional right now, or is that going to happen?
No, I'm pretty confident that by, let's say, the middle of June, that we can open up that field to limited play. I wouldn't permit it 7 days a week, but I would be willing to probably permit it 3 to 5 days a week.
And will you be taking snow offline when O'Donnell's open, or?
Don't have the ability to do that this year, sir.
Okay, but there's an expectation that maybe.
I would love to be able to do a lot of work at Snow Park. It really sort of needs it.
Yeah, it looks rutted.
But again, with the demand for just raw field space, it would be a difficult task.
Understood. Cosgrove Pool. Now, we've been talking about that for a while. It's going to get a significant upgrade with ARPA funds. Is Cosgrove going to be open this year, or is it going to be?
So the plan is to open this year. Like I said, Mr. Pilata and I and the engineer met up there, was it last week or the week before, just to tour the facility. And so the goal would be to have basically, hopefully, the engineering and specs done by close of pool season this year. I can't guarantee that the pool would be open and ready in time after restoration work for summer 2023, but it will be open for summer 2022.
Okay, great. And when do we expect it to open this year?
I haven't confirmed a solid date. School gets out very late this year, so we're working with the Y to make sure that they have guards in place. If you don't have lifeguards, you don't have a pool.
Okay, understood. So the expectation is after the school year ends?
So it would be somewhere late June, early July.
Okay, understood. You also stated that when we were talking about the turf fields, that you were looking into East Junior High, but have you now moved on from East Junior High in consideration for the turf field?
We've had some conversations with the superintendent of schools, and I'm not sure that might not be the best location. So we have sort of identified some other possibilities that might provide enough ample parking and take over some space that's probably not as utilized.
So the issue over at East is the parking situation?
No, I think in conversations that we've had, we were thinking about the fields that are now behind the high school, behind the skating rink over there. There's huge area back there. And it's sort of underutilized. So we might be able to maybe utilize that space for a turf field.
Okay, I believe, yeah, it was a pretty impressively large turf field over there. I believe I saw the drawings for it. It'd be actually 2 soccer fields and a baseball field on that, right? Or something like that?
I haven't seen those drawings, to be honest with you, sir. So I guess I couldn't speak to that.
Okay. I would just ask, when you do have the engineering done of Cosgrove, if you could share that, I'd love to take a look at what we're trying to accomplish over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Tavares, followed by Counselor Azak.
Hi, good evening, company. Thank you for being here today. Actually, I just have a question. My question is like, if you don't belong to any group organization, that means you're not allowed to play? Like, what's the really requirement for, like, for example, like a group of people want to just go and play? Like, you need to have a specific organization, or do you need to create any organization before you go into?
So we have, in terms of sports field or in terms of just park use? So a sports field?
Sports field,
Okay.
yes.
So there's nothing stopping 10 or 12 friends from going and kicking a ball in a field when it's available. The advantage to having a permit is that should another 10 or 12 people that are there are in your way, you can say, hey, I have the permit for this field right now.
All right. What's the rule and regulation for them to apply, or time frame?
So, let's say you're just planning a reunion soccer game on a random Saturday. You could simply call my office. We'll direct you to where the appropriate application is on the city's website. If the field space is available, it's a $25 money order. We don't accept cash, checks, or credit cards. It's money order only. And if the space is available, we'll give you the permit, and away you go.
All right, that means not necessarily you don't need to have any organization. Can be any group.
You could be a group of friends that want to have a place to play whatever, whether it's basketball or soccer or baseball, whatever, do yoga, if that's your thing. The advantage to having a permit as opposed to just showing up to the space is that that space for that determined time is permitted to that one person or individual or group.
All right, that means like if in case the group decide to do so, the application is already online?
Correct.
All right.
So all the applications that I provided to you tonight are available on our Park Department section of the city's website.
Do you guys advertise for public to know? Because I never knew that. I just learned this right now. I know a lot of people does not know as well too.
I think we've done our best to try and advertise it. That's where we direct everyone. We just say, hey, listen, print out that application right there, fill it out, bring it to us, snail mail it to us, email it to us. And when it's time to issue you the permit, you do have to come to the office to pay the $25 admission or application fee, and then you have your permit.
How long does it take the permit to be issued?
Generally speaking, if the space is available, it can be done pretty quickly.
Okay.
A couple of days maximum.
Okay. I know my colleagues all say, we have a huge concern, folks sometimes want to play, but the issue because over 18, that become a huge mess. Actually, I've been here before I became city councilor. And like my colleagues say, how can we do? I know a lot of people like to play sport, including myself. I'm female, but like to do so. A lot of females does like to do so. And then how can we do to kind of work together or put things together to kind of Mr. Rodriguez said, David Tessier as well, and to kind of find the youth parking space for everybody has access.
I think access to the parks in the city, is pretty easy to accomplish, whether it's a birthday party up at the gazebo at DW Field Park, or we have yoga that takes place over at Tataglia Park. I think it's a quick phone call to us. We direct you to the right application, and away you go. It really is relatively simple.
All right, thank you so much. You answered all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Azak.
Thank you,
followed
Mr.
by
Chairman.
Counselor
I'm going to be
Farwell.
really quick. First, we talk about soccer, but I haven't heard mentioned anywhere near South Junior High, and I have had conversations with some of the school department. There is an area there where we could possibly have soccer. Have you had that discussion with anybody?
I haven't. South Junior High, if you're talking about the area right there, sort of we're calling Nelson's.
Yes, yes.
You could have a smaller field in there, but a full-size field would not fit in there.
Okay, but it could be for youth, for the youth to use, which is great. I know I've spoken to some school, some PPS, so that's in the works, so I hope that we keep,
No, I think football will be there in the fall through community schools, so it's definitely a multi-use area.
perfect. I know Counselor Mendez brought up the, our friends at Mellon Street, and you know, we've worked on that for years, and my heart aches. I mean, I don't want to hear a resident gets hit with a golf ball, and we've been trying to get this netting. I know you said you planted trees, and this netting seems to be getting more and more expensive every year, but I've asked you in past budgets to, you know, what can we do to get this netting up there, and I hope it's done this year. And these residents have called me, I've spoken with them, and I've contacted the law department. You know, this is an issue with, they can put in a claim when they have damage done to their properties. But I hate to say it, but I think somebody said to me, well, you know, when they bought their house, the golf course was already there. So that's not what I want to go back and tell, you know, residents. But, so we, you know, we don't want to see any injuries to any kids or any adults, but so as soon as we can possibly, if we can move on getting this netting that we've been talking about, that would be great. I've talked to the mayor about it years ago, actually, at the same time, 2 years ago, when he was first in, and we got these complaints. And that brings me to the last part of my comment is, everybody with COVID, everybody was using the parks, everybody was outdoors more. Can we get ARPA funds to pay for some of these, for whether it's the soccer fields or whether it's this netting? I mean, we should be able to get some money. And I know I've asked you this before, and I've asked our CFO, but it seems like
I think the mayor's committed almost 1.8 or $1.85 million to doing parks in just about every ward in the city.
Right.
And that's on top of the work at the Cosgrove Pool.
Can we get this netting in there?
Well, again, I think between retained earnings and, you know, if I have to dip into the DW Field Trust to
That
do
was
it,
the other thing, and then the golf course, the revenue from the golf course,
which is where I get my retained earnings from.
Okay.
Yep.
So I know, like I said, I've asked you about it offline, but since it's here, if we can do something really to speed it up, because we don't really want to see any more
I
injuries.
already have an agreement with the designer, like I say, so he's working on it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Farwell.
Thank you. Just very quickly, we talk a lot about infrastructure, sewer mains, water mains. We're borrowing a lot of money. We really do need to address what Councilor D'Agostino brought up, and that is your staffing. I mean, if we once get that in place, and then we get the equipment that you need, whether it's some from free cash, some from a $2 million bond issue, extra money to augment what Councilor Rodriguez put aside when he was mayor for the soccer field. I mean, that really, I know we're coming up in the budget time, but I think you and the mayor really need to put something together and maybe present it to us so we can act on it. And, you know, you can't make chicken soup out of chicken feathers, and you're not going to be able to take care of all that acreage with just a minimum amount of staffing and with substandard equipment. So I think this has been a pretty good discussion. By the way, with respect to Parmenter, colleagues, I don't think it was people playing soccer, and I don't think it was people from the city that caused a problem with parking in driveways and throwing beer bottles and this and that. Unfortunately, I think it was spectators from out of town. It wasn't our people. The people that went there were pretty responsible, but unfortunately it attracted a crowd. So I'm going to move favorable recommendation.
Second.
On the motion, Counselor Rodriguez.
On the motion, Tim, don't get me wrong. I think you guys do an awesome job with what you have. You know, you can't make a mountain out of a molehill in some instances, and you can't make chicken soup without the chicken and the rice, right? But you do a great job, and that's not, the intent of asking you to come here was not to sit here and bash the park department in any way. But we wanted to make sure that, I mean, the young man sitting in the back of the room there, he is part of the, that Sunday league, I guess that's at East Junior High. And a couple of the folks that actually play on that league informed me this week that they've lost a couple players with broken legs because the field is in terrible shape. And they used to play at Parmenta, and they were moved to East. So what I'm gonna do here is basically ask you, do you already have the individuals in mind to use O'Donnell once you start that process?
So I have there's been a request from a women's, I guess they're adult, a couple of dates. And I can't remember those 3 dates, but I think there are 3 dates in June that they have asked, 3 or 4 dates in June.
Could we move that Sunday league from East to O'Donnell on a Sunday?
On Sundays?
Yeah.
But I can't guarantee practice time during the week.
Oh, practice, like, they don't need to play a full-fledged soccer for practice, but at least to play their games there on a safer field.
If they'd like to come to my office, and yeah, then we can work something out.
Well, he's sitting right back there,
I
so that he
understand,
can actually tell
but
you that.
We would have to amend their permit and
Okay.
whatnot, so yes, I mean, it would take some administrative work, but I think we could probably
Work that out?
work that out.
Okay. Because another problem that I noticed, because I live on that side of town, I've seen some kids, and I've chased a few of them down on motorcycles on that field, turning that thing up, you know? So a lot of times, by not, and I've seen people actually play soccer, or at least kicking the ball around on the field. That's not a league playing on those fields, so kind of putting the works on the field itself. So it's not, again, like what Council Falwell was saying, it's not necessarily the soccer players that are walking around with needles in their arms shooting up, that you find the needles on the ground, or, you know, breaking dropping the beer bottles all over the place. It's people from the outside doing that. But there's been some neighborhood kids. Like I said, I went there, you know, played the old council / former mayor / police wannabe or whatever, to basically say to those kids, you know, cut the crap. You know, you're destroying the field that people have spent a great deal of money on and stuff like that. So
It's a problem all over the city, to be honest with you, Counselor.
yeah, so perhaps if we can kind of at least accommodate those individuals that want to be partners with you in terms of helping you, you know, upkeep some of these fields as well. Because one of the things that we had done in the past is to put the ownership back on these leagues, to say, you know what, you owe it to the city to pick up the trash, do what you can to help us out, beyond just playing on these fields. You know, put it on them as well, and see what happens.
And, you know, the gentleman that was at Palmenter's, you know, he was, I think he was very good about taking responsibility for a lot of that stuff, but it was an overwhelming task for one person, and unfortunately, it was just one person to try and maintain.
Yeah. But, you know, if you could do that, you know, also, before I get off here, when you permit, let's say a team on a Sunday, do you permit them all day long or just in hours, like in schedules, basically?
It depends on their request, sir.
So they'll come in and say Sunday, and so they got the whole
Well, no,
Sunday?
we ask for a time, obviously, you know, but some people say noon to 5.
Okay.
Okay, it's available noon to 5.
And
We
can
might
somebody
be able
else
to
have it from
sneak
9
somebody in there in the
to
morning.
noon?
I'm sorry?
Do you sneak somebody in there from 9 to noon?
We may try. We try not to, we like to keep at least an hour and a half to 2 hours between organizations so that there's not an overlap.
Because we've got a supply and demand issue here.
Absolutely,
You know, there's
sir.
a lot more demand than we have the supply for, so, you know, if you can kind of make that work, it saves us a bunch of headaches and losing hair in the sense, and it helps you out as well, too. But I do agree that you do need some help to, you know, to seriously, we spend money out of this city doing the dumbest of things. We complain about that there's not enough things for kids to do, but yet we do not staff areas that need staffing to deal with the issues that we have in this community. And I think if you came here asking for an extra 2 or 3 positions, I don't think a single member of this council would vote against that for you.
All right. We'll see you in August.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Counselor. There's a motion properly made and seconded on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Now, at this late hour, are there any?
Yes,
moments of
council's
personal
recognition.
privilege? Counselor Azar.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow, May 17th, 6 PM, here in council chambers, we will be having an ordinance committee meeting. And they are public hearings because we will be discussing outdoor dining and food trucks. So the public is welcome to comment during the public hearing. On May 18th, which is Wednesday at 11 a.m., there is Haitian Flag Day here at City Hall Plaza. And lastly, I would like to congratulate Brockton High School's Drama Club for putting on an amazing musical performance of Hello Dolly this past weekend. But something even more amazing happened. There was a special historic moment of, the city named the stage at the Nelson Auditorium. It was named after Miss Thomas and Mr. Macrina, who are icons in the city of Brockton. So the stage in the auditorium will be known as the Carol Thomas and Vincent Macrina stage. So congratulations to them. We're grateful for their amazing artistic leadership with our kids. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. I'd like to take a moment to wish my sister Grace a happy 19th birthday, and seeing no other business, we are adjourned.